Are you ready? Okay, so let's call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. First order of business is to appoint or announce the new appointments. We have Ken Brenner that has been appointed from Garfield County to represent their interests on this board. As far as I know, that seat has never been filled by Garfield, so Ken's taking over for that. And Andy Rossi, oh, there you are, Andy. Andy Rossi is been appointed by the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District as their new member, starting with this meeting. So welcome, both of you. Would you like to, either of you like to say a few words, or you good to go?
Sure, I'll just say a couple. Most of you know me, some of you not very much. I've interacted with this board intermittently. Just so you all know a bit of my background. I worked for the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District since 2009. I was previously in the position of the district engineer, took over the general manager's position in 2019. And I'm awfully familiar with everything you all do here. And we at the Upper Yampa District have quite a busy and full plate right now. So at some point, I hope to be able to share all that with you. And for this first meeting, I'm going to listen a lot, try to come up to speed on where you are. And I probably every now and then may have to raise my hand to abstain from the vote, not having been at previous cases here and there. So thank you.
Okay. Ken?
Just nice to be able to continue serving on the roundtable.
Okay, so let's go with introduction of members and audience. Kristen, did you want to
Like that?
call the roll?
Yeah, I can do that. Side by side now, side by side, yeah, something like that.
We've had a few technical difficulties this evening, so we're still trying to iron them out.
And I'll just pass this, signing sheet around if anybody needs to sign it, and then. Sonia Macy's?
So Sonia was online.
Sonia, can you hear us?
She was online, I saw her, but it looks like she's dropped off. She may be having a bit of internet trouble.
We'll keep an eye out. About Miranda Cowcheck.
Miranda's on.
Can't hear them. Oh, me and Miranda.
Miranda's online.
Yep, I can hear you.
That's the technical difficulties. We run into 2 hours. I know.
We want the sound to come out of the owls.
I think it's calendar year. That we should have to read.
All right, Miranda's here.
So you guys started
Doug Overton?
first 20 minutes of your meeting, getting all the technology.
But
Uh,
don't you got mine. 50 homes in our meeting.
But if I'm talking to owls, there. Now Doug,
Oh, it's second.
how about Ken Brenner
Yes, I'm here.
and Julie Baxter? Here. And Stephen Hinkmeyer
Here.
and Alden Vandenbrink.
Here.
Doug working. And Andy Bradley.
Here.
And Mike Camlin,
Here.
and Sean Welder.
Here, here.
And Tim Winkler. And Casey. Green. Oh, I skipped Jay Sheehan. I know Tim Winkler. And Casey Green. Rebecca Breezemore.
Bill's here online. I thought she was trying to get here. She might have just late arriving.
She might be, yeah, weird functioning.
I hope so, because she's presenting twice.
Callie, I didn't change your last name on the switch bill. Here. Will Myers.
Here.
Ken Beatrice,
Me, yes, here.
Frank Alphone,
Here.
and Rich Thompson,
Here.
and Jeff Myers. Doug Monger,
Here.
and Jeff Comstock. Or Doug Davis. Charles Whiteman,
Here.
Chris Collins. Jennifer Holloway.
I'm here.
Travis Day,
I'm here.
Bill Badaraka,
Here.
Vince Wilczek. You're right, Dickinson. Jonathan Bowler.
Here.
And Jackie Brown.
Here.
All right, that's 20. Got a quorum.
We have a quorum, okay.
Hey,
All right,
sorry,
so-
this is Sonia Macy's. I missed my roll call, but I'm here, Sonia Macy's, Route County.
Thanks, Sonia.
Okay, so did you want to call some of the audience, Kristen, or
Well,
you just pick them up off the,
oh,
well, no, you want to just pick them up off of the list?
grab the audience off of here.
Okay. And you send around the sign, so anybody that's in the audience that's a non-member, Lauren, you wanna?
Oh, sure. Lauren, you don't know. I'm Lauren Riss. I'm the director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and I have a few minutes later in the agenda to do a little bit more of an intro that maybe you haven't.
I'm Diana Lane with the Nature Conservancy, standing in for Jennifer Wellman. I'm chatting with Mike about the Nadal project.
Hi, Ashley Garrison, Regional Water Plant Grant Manager with CWCP.
Okay, everybody knows Sally and Kristen, so. I think we're okay, you can just pick up because the other attendees kind of go. We can add Rebecca.
This is my mom, Trace Parade. Hello. I drove on the train today.
I hope she's hungry.
What a fascinating way for your mother to spend an evening.
And I might take a bow to try to get some steps, since I've been very sedentary today.
Okay, so, all right, so we need to approve and modify the agenda. Has everybody had to look at the agenda?
I make that one.
I don't know, second that one.
What do you want to modify?
So I want to modify, so the Big River presentation, Rebecca is not going to talk about the Big River specifics that you have in your CRD presentation. So I would like to make give Rebecca 10 minutes instead of 5 to cover all the Big River stuff that's gonna happen. And down in announcements, I was gonna talk about the environmental representative vacancy. We're gonna have another vacancy on the board after this meeting. So I wanted to talk about the industrial users vacancy that will be coming up after this meeting as well. So I'd like to make those, like, one change and one addition to the agenda. Are you good with that?
Yeah.
Those changes, friends, good, okay. So we have a motion and a second to modify the agenda. Any other conversation, any other thoughts on the agenda? Hearing none. We'll call the motion, all in favor of accepting the motion on the floor to modify the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed to changing the agenda, please say nay. Okay, the ayes have it, modified, the agenda will be modified. So, public comment. Oh, excuse me, I jumped ahead. Review and approve the May 8th, 2024 minutes. Kristen sent those out a while ago to you. There were a few changes that people submitted, really just wordsmithing sort of changes. I don't think there was anything major, but please take a look at those. They're kind of a new format. We're trying to get more in line with what the CWCB folks want in the kind of some brevity around the minutes, not write 5-6 pages for a 3-hour meeting, get it in 2 pages, 2.5 pages, whatever. So this is Kristen's first stab at it with our minutes. So all of our minutes will probably take that same format going forward. And I think all the Big River minutes, the grant committee minutes and the PEPO minutes will look really similar to these. So we're trying to make them a little shorter, a little sweeter, not try to cover every topic that was discussed in each section of the agenda, but just kind of summarize quickly the gist of it. If there's anything voted on, there was a decision made into that agenda item, and if there wasn't, just move it. Ken?
And this is for at least 2 reasons. One, just have minutes that you'll share with maybe your board members or other groups that you represent. And actually have them read it. You know, if you hand them a 5-page stack of paper to read for the minutes, they may not read them. So that's one reason. And then the other thing that our staff is doing is they're trying and making a serious effort to get these turned around right away. Now you'll see them come back to you in this format that says draft in big red letters. But at least you'll have a preliminary report back to your organization. That's all. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Ken. So I would take a motion to approve the minutes.
Brenner moves approval.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any conversation around?
I'm gonna abstain from the vote. I'm forward to the last meeting.
Note that, please, Kristen. So any comments about the minutes? Otherwise, we'll call the motion. All in favor of approving the minutes as written, and as submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to approving the minutes, please say nay. Okay, the ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Public comment. Sally or Kristen, did we get anybody requesting time through the email portal? Okay. Anybody in the room like to comment? Jonathan?
I just, like to announce that the Headwaters of the Colorado Initiative received notification that we were awarded the Water Smart CWMP grant. So we'll be completing the watershed restoration plan for the Headwaters of Colorado geography, which is the Little Snake and Elk River watersheds, north of Highway 40 and up to the Little, almost up to I-80, including Muddy Creek watershed as well. So that grant will be, those funds will be distributed towards the end of this year, and next year we'll start on that restoration plan. We're also going to use that award as match for Colorado Water Conservation Board Wildfire Ready Action, the watersheds grant program that we'll submit on Friday. And so that'll have the Wildfire Ready Action Plan involved with that. So we will have two different management plans, one with the wildfire focus and one with the watershed focus, beginning next year. And those will likely have quite a list of project implementation ideas and objectives as well. I'm going to share that with the group and let you know we'll be working full steam ahead on that pretty soon.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
It's all the question there, wildfire ready watershed analysis, are you gonna draw a line at the Wyoming border?
No, so that's planning funds will be allowed to use in both Wyoming and Colorado. It's kind of the flagship approach to that. Any project implementation fund will be Colorado.
Thanks.
Ken?
Just wanted to let everyone know, you might have read this or seen it. The work that Friends of Yampa has been doing with the outstanding water designation, it has been heard from the Colorado Water Control Commission. And we are getting approved for about 278 miles of designation on our headwater streams and mostly in Round County, all in the national forest, for outstanding water designation on these streams. After thousands of hours and lots of meetings and public outreach, we came about 384 miles are being designated in Northwest Colorado, and 278 of them are in Round County. So there's existing outstanding waters, mostly in our wilderness areas, that were designated way back when, and now we're getting designation on 278 miles of rivers and streams below the wilderness, all in. What that means, thank you. It just is an additional layer of protection on these streams in case somebody wants to do disturb the waterfall. Forest Service is gonna have to do it. We did have to take out Fish Creek and Inman Creek. We were applying for those, but those came out of the list after negotiations. But we have Walton Creek, Soda Creek, Fork City, Elk River, rivers and streams up in the Little Snake River Basin, and then First Creek. You want to know more about them?
Okay, thank you. Anybody online? Have a public comment? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on. Before we go to the CWCB update. Mindy, you want to introduce yourself? Kind of a latecomer? You missed your opportunity.
Yeah, no, my name is Mindy Figueroa. I'm the water commissioner for District 58 for the Division of Water Resources.
Thank you. All right, CWCB, the budget report. Jeff, are you online?
I am, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Can you give me screen sharing ability? And while Kristen or Patrick or Sally's doing that, I'll start with the budget report. I think Frank's probably going to cover it in more depth, but right now, as it stands, the Yampa White Green Basin account balance is $497,789. There is $112,250 in grants on the docket for the September board meeting, which would leave your balance, if everything gets approved in September, at $385,539. That September board meeting is the end of the WSRF grant year, so a full allocation of 300,000, it looks like, if everything gets approved in September. So things are looking good for you all.
Thank you.
Any questions on that before I move to the CWCB, just kind of general updates?
I think we're good.
Was there a question?
No, there was not.
Okay, my audio cut out for a second there, so sorry about that. Okay, I'll start with kind of the most exciting thing, the C9 Summit. If you scan that little QR code in the corner there, you can sign up for the C9 Summit. We're doing a little bit of a early registration for Roundtable members, the CWCB board, and the IVCC before we release this registration information to the general public and next week. So you have a little bit of time, but if you know you want to go to C9 Summit, you can scan that QR code and sign up. So reminder, that is October 1st and 2nd at the Center for the Arts in Crested Butte. October 1st is going to be, we've organized 3 different tours in the afternoon as folks are kind of rolling into the Crested Butte area. When you sign up, you can select which one of those 3 tours you want to be a part of, if you do, and then October 2nd is the full day summit, and we have a draft agenda up online on Engage. We're still finalizing that agenda and locking in speakers and things like that, but I think topically you can take a look at what things are going to be discussed there at C9. It's shaping up to be a great event like we had last year, and look forward to a lot of folks from the Yampa White Green participating. We can reimburse up to 10 members, roundtable members per basin. That being said, if you are not a roundtable member, but you're a frequent attendee and you want to join in on the C9 Summit, we certainly encourage that and work with your chair to, sign up for those 10 spots. And Steve, reach out to me if you get a flurry of folks and you need more than 10, let me know. There may be something we can do, but 10 folks per basin right now. Okay, other things. The CWCB guide, we released a draft of the CWCB guide on Engage CWCB, I think last month. And it's up there on Engage CWCB. You can read the draft, submit comments and questions there on Engage. You can also email me with comments or questions as well if you prefer to do it that way. But just trying to drive more folks there. Take a look at that comment. We are trying to finalize the guide in the fall and incorporate all the comments and questions that we got during this kind of draft period. Also wanted to mention the Colorado River webinar series. That was originally scheduled for tomorrow at 9:30. It's been canceled for tomorrow because there are no major updates on the ongoing negotiations. The next webinar is tentatively scheduled for August 8th at 11:30. Those webinar dates are subject to change. Commissioner Mitchell and the interstate and federal team, their schedules change rapidly without much notice. So we just want you all to check in on the CWCB calendar for those webinar dates. All of the webinar information and the link to it will be on the CWCB calendar. Also wanted to mention the water plan grant cycle. The application deadline was July 1st. We got 41 applications for a total ask of $11.6 million. That is about half of what's been allocated for the water plan grant program for this fiscal year. So a pretty competitive application cycle. We certainly expect the December cycle to be even more competitive as it has been in years past. Just that July deadline creeps up on folks, I think. But the water plan grant team has updated the webpage with a lot more information, including things like grant timelines, letters of support questions, all of those things. So visit the water plan grant webpage when you can. I'll drop a link for all of this stuff, the Summit, the water plan grant webpage, the Colorado River information webpage when I'm done here. So there'll be a flurry of links that I'll drop here when I'm done. But also just wanted to mention the Wildfire Ready Watersheds program and the Local Capacity and Technical Assistance program. We're still accepting applications for those on a rolling basis. Time's getting tight for those grant programs. They are tied to the state's ARPA funding. So there is a contracting deadline of December, end of December this year. So we probably need to see those applications by mid-September in order to contract those by the deadline. So if you're thinking about a project, my hope is you've already talked to CWCB staff. If you haven't and you're working on it or thinking about it, please get in touch with CWCB staff as soon as possible. And then let's see, what else do I have here? I think that's all I've got. Just a plug for the water conditions monitoring program. Next meeting for that is July 23rd. As kind of runoff comes to a close, we're seeing good precipitation indicators across the state. Reservoir storage is sitting at about 93%. But these meetings are really great information regarding snowpack forecasting, all of that stuff. So join in if you can. They're also recorded and posted to the CWCB YouTube page. I think that's all I got. I'll certainly take any questions before I kick it over to Director Brown.
Peter, got one question.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, this is Andy Ross. I have a question about the future of the Wildfire Ready Watersheds program. Indicated that the funding contracting needs to be done by December. What about 2025 and beyond?
That's a good question. I don't know if Director Riss wants to take that one, but I know CWCB staff has been working on a way to stabilize that funding, but right now that is tied to the state's ARPA funding and there is that contracting deadline.
Yeah, that's, if I jump in.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. So the ARPA funding does have an expiration date. However, through our water plan grant program, the environment and recreation bucket that we have set aside does look at welfare ready watershed action plans, and we'll consider those as part of, you know, qualifying grant applications. So those won't be limited to welfare ready watershed projects, but certainly will be eligible and likely prioritized. So I think there still remains funding available. And, you know, we're seeing sports betting revenues, which is what these water plan grants continue to climb. So we're looking at stable funding, at least as far as that goes.
Thanks. Jeff, you have your hand raised? Oh, Dan did. Sorry.
Hey, Jeff, I was wondering if you could fill us in just a little bit on the C9. We're not limited as a roundtable to only 10 people, but we have the potential for reimbursement of expenses of 10 people. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think Russ and I have been talking, trying to maybe encourage a little bit more participation from each roundtable. We'll probably keep the IBCC members separate from those 10. And so, yeah, I think we can reimburse up to 10 for lodging and mileage, but certainly not limited to 10 from the basin to participate. We hope that there will be widespread participation across the state, but just trying to help out in ways that we can.
And one other question, are we trying to help coordinate who is going, or is that everybody's reporting directly to you? How would you like that in?
So it's probably best if you work with Steve to just kind of organize those 10 reimbursement spots. And then certainly we'll be working with me on the back end to get that taken care of.
Thank you, Jeff.
Any other questions for Jeff? Anybody online have a question for Jeff? Hearing none, Jeff, I think you're off the hook.
All right, I'll be around all meeting if something comes up, but just real quick, I mentioned IBCC members will be separate from those 10, also CWCB board members separate from those 10 folks from the basin that are eligible for reimbursement.
Thank you. Jackie, are you still with us?
So, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, awesome. I think Jeff covered what I was going to cover and more, because I didn't know the webinar had been canceled with our own Mike Camblin. So look forward to seeing that rescheduled, hopefully. CWCB, we met last in Grand Lake area in Director Boucher's neck of the wood. We had a really great meeting. We talked a little bit about the current situation at Glen Canyon Dam and the cavitation that was happening. So that was a really interesting presentation. If you missed it, maybe worth a YouTube for the Big River Committee. And that was the first meeting that we were all, I think, fully in person both days, given a winter storm in March. So I believe I already told you guys, and you probably know that we have 2 new directors. Director Wind from Northern Water is filling the seat for the South Platte, and then Director McLeod is back on the board after a short hiatus for the Gunnison River Basin. So it's really great having both of them on. We meet again this coming week in Walden, if anyone's passing through. And I pulled up the agenda. You know, I think of note, we do have an SCPP update alongside, you know, our regular Colorado River updates, and a couple other things on turf replacement program criteria and guidelines following some funding and legislative mandates there. And, I think it's not a super heavy meeting, so I'm happy to take any questions from you all. And this is always kind of an awkward time to give you a report, because it's either happened right before your past meeting or it will be happening the following week. So I feel like all of my news is kind of old. I apologize for that.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We're chock full of CWCB staffers, so I don't know if this is the right time or another time. But my question is about Senate Bill 197, one section in there, the drought task force. The new ability to loan stored water to non-instream flow reaches. Will the CWCB have to undertake a rulemaking process before that is available as an option to stored water owners?
Yes, we will. And that has not been scheduled yet, but our in-stream flow staff is aware of it, and we'll work with the Attorney General's office to make that happen. But yeah, it will require a rulemaking.
End of the year? Early 2025?
I tell you what, let me check in with our in-stream flow staff and see if they have a date, a targeted date yet.
That'd be great.
They might, and I'm just not aware of it.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Jackie? Anybody online have a question for Jackie? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Hopefully have a good time in Walden next week.
I'm sure we will. We're all looking forward to it for sure. Thanks.
All right, so the water commissioner's corner is going to be a little bit different today. Lauren Briss, the CWCB director, was kind enough to come on our tour of Maybell Ditch and the Yampa corridor project today. And I've given her some time to just talk to us, and then any questions we want to ask, we're open to do that. So.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Between Jeff and Jackie, I don't know if there's much left for me to say, but I'll just use the time to talk about myself then. I do appreciate you inviting me on the tour. That was really great to see Maybell. I've heard about that project for years and years now. I don't know how many different grants we've received on that, but it's been a few. So it was really great to see it completed. So I really appreciate Sally and Steve and others for organizing it. Mike, I know you played a big role in that, so I really appreciate that. And then seeing the boat ramp and the water park is also just really cool. So good timing with the kids on the river. Next time we'll have to bring our own flotation devices, I think. So yeah, thanks for having me. I've been in this role now for not quite a year. I was appointed last August. And you probably all know this story, but this came about from the previous legislative session when they split out the Colorado River Commissioner position from the CWCB director role, because frankly, the issues going on in the Colorado River were all consuming. So Becky Mitchell moved into the River Commissioner role, and then I took over as the CWCB director. I have been Becky's deputy at CWCB for about 7 years. So I was well versed in what the CWCB does and the various issues that we deal with as the staff and programs and so forth. So I hope it was a pretty seamless transition. Becky and I continue to be in really close contact. And our interstate and federal section, which is led by Amy Ostick, you probably heard at roundtable meetings over the last couple of years, continues to support Becky. Her team consists of about 10 staff members at CWCB, and they work daily, hourly, sometimes with Becky in her role as commissioner, alongside our attorneys at the Attorney General's office and folks at the state engineer's office as well. So it's a really great team, and I hope that at least from the water users' perspective, that it's been a pretty seamless transition. Just a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Colorado, grew up along the Front Range, and then left and went to school in the Pacific Northwest and went to school again in Michigan and did a stint in Washington DC and did some salmon recovery work in the Pacific Northwest and ultimately decided that I really miss Colorado and all the opportunities that are here. My family was here, so I moved back and then worked for the Colorado State Legislature for a handful of years on the Water Committee and the Agriculture Committee, and got to really know that process for good or evil. But that's really how I kind of got my experience in the water policy world in Colorado, and then moved over to the Department of Natural Resources, where under Hickenlooper, where I started actually for the first couple of years as the DNR's legislative liaison, or laureus. I don't like to use that word, but that is what the position functions as for the department. And then from there took over as the assistant director for water, which is currently the position that Kelly Romero has. And then moved over to CWCB. So I have a good 15 years or so kind of working in this space for the state, and have just really come to appreciate the value, I hope that CWCB provides, both in terms of actual monetary value, the amount of funding that we get out the door every year, and just the technical expertise that we bring with our staff. I'm just so proud of everybody that works at CWCB, with Ashley and Jeff and Russ being key members of our staff. They're really, I think, motivated by the mission and really trying to be accessible to the community. And I hope that's what you all experience. If not, let me know. Let me know. But it's a really great group of people. This last year, my priorities have really been around making sure that we're really staffed up, along with the position that created the separate full-time position for the Colorado River Commissioner with Becky Mitchell. We also got a handful of additional staff. And we've had some key vacancies come about through retirements and other people moving on. So when I came into the job, we had about 10 positions vacant. So we worked really hard to get those filled with quality people. We were getting the regional grant managers up and running, which I think has just been a huge value to the water community around the state. I hear nothing but good things about the work that Ashley and her colleagues provide, living and working in the communities that they're serving. So that has been, I think, a really important move that the CWCB has made. And then also making sure that we just had a really functional and well-positioned board. When I started, we had just initiated going through an operational planning process with our board, which sounds, fairly mundane and boring, but it resulted in some really key outcomes, one of which was the CWCB guide. And the intent of that, I'm sure you've heard Jeff and Russ talk about, was really to try and delineate the roles and responsibilities of the CWCB board, the IBCC, the roundtables, whose role is what our board has the authority to do, what the DNR department has the ability to do versus the governor, and really try to provide, I think, a common narrative and framework that we can all refer back to, because it is confusing. I think the stakeholder sort of scaffolding and structure that we have in place is just so supremely important to how we do water policy in the state of Colorado, but it's also confusing. So I'm really hopeful that that'll provide some clarity going forward, and just a common reference point for all of us and new board members, frankly, coming on, because they cycle on and off more frequently than I would like. It seems like once we get them educated out, their term has expired. So those two things were really important to me, just to get our house in order, fully functioning staff and really well-positioned board. And then other than that, I came on right after we released the updated water plan. And so I feel like now our role is to really put our money where our mouth is and implement what we said we were going to do with the help of you all and our partners across the state. So, that's really being led by Russ and his team, and they've been doing a tremendous job. But I have really been supportive of checking those boxes and doing what we said we were going to do and making progress on the water plan, because it does us no good if it just sits on our shelf. And then finally, my priority has been really making sure that we're leveraging all the federal funding that's out now, or that is imminently out with IRA funding. And part of what we did to really make sure that we were positioned well was to have these technical capacity grants that Jeff mentioned. It does have a time clock on it, but those grants have been so important for us to fill the capacity gap that we kept hearing about from communities. We know there's all this funding out there, but frankly, we just don't have the bodies to apply for the funding, to identify the funding, and then put it to good use. So that's one way that we try to really fill that gap. I was gonna mention our new board members, but Jackie already did that. I don't think she mentioned that at our last board meeting, we also had a shift in the chair of the CWCB board that was held by Greg Felt from the Arkansas for this last year. And our process is that every year we rotate who's the chair of our board. So the new chair is Nathan Coombs from the Rio Grande, and our vice chair is Lorelei Cloud from the Southwest. And I think the really great thing about our board is that we have really deep talent. So I know that they're going to do just a great job following in Greg's footsteps. Let's see, Jeff mentioned the C9 Summit. I hope to see a lot of you there. I'll be there for both days, and I'm really looking forward to a productive discussion. I think that was the majority of what I wanted to cover, but really I wanted to be here to listen to you all, and if there are any questions you have for me, I'm happy to take them. I have been up since 4 a.m. getting here from Denver, so I might not be the sharpest in my answers, but I'll do that. So thanks for having me.
Anybody have a question they'd like to ask for in the room or online? Ken?
Well, first of all, thank you for coming up here. This isn't exactly on the way to the store. But, and especially to make the tour, I know that was hard, but thank you. I think what I'd like to hear is, one of the topics that's been more relevant in the last couple of years is how to better integrate the Colorado Water Conservation Board and all the responsibilities that you have and the work that is done here in the grassroots, and how to use more effectively use the IBCC as some sort of a conduit. What's your vision about how that might evolve, and how would you see our participation helping support that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a perennial question, I feel like, with the IBCC for as long as I've been paying attention. I do want to emphasize just the critical importance that I see the roundtables playing and the IBCC, and primarily, looking back to Russ George and what his vision was of that, I think still rings true. It's just a matter of how to assign tasks and responsibilities to the IBCC, but just providing that forum for cross-basin communication, and being able to just have the hard conversations, even though I know it's not pretty and it doesn't always feel productive. In fact, a lot of times it feels like deja vu. But I think the value of the IBCC is having a group of people from around the state that represent the roundtables and governor appointments and our board members that really can self-identify what the important topics are that need discussed, and then feeding that back to the CWCB board. I think the C9 Summit, really provides that opportunity to have the conversation with our board there. I mean, I think that's one thing that I've heard the last couple of years that seems to be just historically kind of a piece that was missing. Like, how does that conversation actually happen? And there have been conversations in the past about, well, maybe we have a joint IBCC meeting and a board meeting. But I think that's essentially what the C9 Summit accomplishes. It's a little bit bigger than that. But I think there's a lot of good conversation in my mind that needs to happen around forest health issues and around climate resiliency. And I know the water plan talks about, probably gonna get slapped by Russ for saying this, but kind of a safe space to have conversations around TMDs and kind of picking up the conceptual framework and what does that look like going forward. But my vision for the IBCC, I think it's just consistent with Russ George's, that needs to be the forum to have statewide conversations. And I know it feels messy, but that's just part of the process. And I think the C9 Summit has been, I think, a step forward and at least providing the connective tissue between the roundtables, the IBCC, and the CWCB board.
Thanks for your support of the C9.
Yeah.
Thank you for your.
If you want me to give you a write-up, a task list, I could probably come up with one. But I think the value of the IBCC is having you all determine what questions need to be answered and how your time is best spent.
We'll have that exercise later tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Your homework.
Get your homework ready, kids.
Anybody else have a question? here in the room or online for more?
And I have an open door email policy, so, you know, if you have any thoughts about anything that we're doing, or staff is doing, or programs, feel free to email me. I'm on our CWCB website, and, my phone number's there too, so. Free to reach out.
Okay, well, I would just like to make a comment, Lauren. I think adding Ashley and faculty, regional water plant managers, grant managers has been incredibly helpful to us. You know, we get really good support on the WSRM side. You know, we just didn't have anybody until we get Ashley, and now she's first or second call, it seems like.
I hear nothing but good things. I did want to mention this, I don't know how this is gonna play out to the, community in terms of applying for grants, but we did get approved an additional position for the grant managers, and it will be a grant supervisor. So we will, be taking the kind of the grant section from the water plant grants and WSRF staff and kind of moving them into a new programmatic section of CWCD that will have their own manager. So hopefully that will create some efficiencies in terms of how our grants are managed. And we'll just frankly add another pair of eyes and hands to do the work. So.
Okay, so more on that topic, will that be in place next year?
We're working on hiring it right now. It's been posted and we are reviewing applicants. A decision hasn't been made yet who's gonna fill that position, but it's imminent.
Does that mean that Ben will get phased into something else?
That's right. So Ben will continue to do WSRF, but he'll just be under a different supervisor and in a section that's primarily dedicated to administering grants. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing it, chair.
Oh, okay. Yes.
You know when to start.
That's right. No, there's no end date to Ben.
We've got a question from Doug Monder.
Doug, do you have a question for Lauren?
Yeah, so Lauren, I just quick question. So we hear all the time about the gambling fund, how that's going to be to the system and the rest, and I think you guys have been putting those out, and I guess for our information back here on the table, back on the ground here, how is that getting dealt out and back to your regular funds that you've had all the time anyhow?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. So, sports betting revenue, which is the tax on casinos from sports betting, almost all of that, I don't know what the percentage is, like over 95% goes to our water plant grant program. Initially we were getting like $10-12 million. This year we got $23 million that's going towards that program. There was a piece of legislation, and I don't have the bill number up on my computer, but there was a piece of legislation this last session that is a referred measure that will essentially remove the Tabor cap on that revenue stream. And so what that means is if sports betting revenue were to exceed $30 million, anything above and beyond that would be refunded back to the casinos. This referred measure will be on the November election, and we'll ask voters, would you rather have excess of $30 million instead of going back to casinos, going to the water plant grant program? So we're, as a state, we don't have a position on that one way or the other, but the folks that are running that initiative have done quite a bit of polling and say that it polls pretty favorably. So if that's the case, the projections are that in the next few years, we'll be getting upwards of $30+ million a year that will go to that program. So it's been just an incredible steady stream of revenue that goes to fund water projects all around the state. Initially, that fund was supported or supplemented really by our construction fund, just to kind of level it out and stabilize it for its early years. But the last couple of years, it has not received an infusion from our construction fund, from our cash funds, or from the state's general fund. It's been fully supported by sports betting revenue. And I think I think the future is bright.
Are you allowed to tell us who the advocacy group is that we can work with?
So one of the proponents is the Environmental Defense Fund. And what do they call themselves? Water for People, which is a coalition of different groups that initially ran the property measure.
You say they call themselves what?
Water for People, I believe. Yeah. Waterford, Colorado. Waterford, Colorado. Okay, sorry. Waterford, Colorado. Yeah.
And there's no prohibition on us, as a roundtable, we're not being paid by the state.
That's a good question. I might need to get back to that. I mean, I think it's fine for you as Ken, as an individual to support it, for your independent organizations to support it. I am not sure how that would work as a roundtable to come out and endorse state ballot measure, but I'll think yeah, Oh, Russ, why don't you just pipe that? Russ says
Hey, everybody. Oh, I'm here. I've been here. No, thanks. Good job. Yeah, I think the DNR handbook, and this is linked in the CWCB guide as well, but makes clear, and we've had this come up in several different roundtables on different topics, but roundtables aren't, roundtables, IBCC, even our board, not officially allowed to make a vote on any active legislation or a political candidate, for example. There are other, there's some examples of where like a roundtable might have wanted to sign an MOU. There's no legal authority behind that, but that's something that a roundtable could do. But as Director Riss said, if you want to, as an individual, support something, you could certainly do that.
Thanks, Russ. Any other questions? Hearing none. Thanks, Lauren, you're off the hook.
Hey, thanks. I'm tired, so I'm glad.
Mike?
Roughly
built it. Yes, sir.
You've got our,
Sally's got it.
so Dan and I are gonna tag team on this a little bit, and I apologize, I've seen this slideshow a while back, but it's been modified a little bit, and, so if I don't know what it is, I'm gonna leave it to. All right, so, first of all, I want to thank everybody that came out for the tour today. I know you guys have probably heard enough of the Mayville ditch, so you're probably a little sick and tired of it, but it's really good to get people out there so they really know where the money went, and this organization was instrumental in putting the project together. I mean, I think one of the very first conversations that I had was, I knew we wanted to do it, but Kent was the one that actually pushed me a little bit one day. He said, I think this will get done. So this project actually came from the Roundtable one, and it was the start of it. And so I appreciate that from everybody that's here, and a lot of the past members that aren't here anymore. But in my mind, that makes us work. This works. The Roundtable work. So, and then of course, I want to really thank the Nature Conservancy for doing all the work that they did, because we couldn't have done it without them. So, it's been a big plus. We put a really good team together, not only with the Nature Conservancy, but then, JUB Engineers and JHL, and, we all just kind of clicked. I'm not saying that there wasn't problems here and there, but, when you do a project this size, you're going to have some of those, but it was really a good group to work with. I'm pretty proud of it. So, that being said, go ahead and get to the next slide. So of course, this is the district, there's about 18 miles of ditch there. Basically the green, is fields that are getting irrigated off the ditch, but the district runs between the yellow line, which is the ditch, and the Yampa River, and so our district is the land between those two spots. And there's give or take 2,500 acres there is what there is. Next slide. So this is what it looked like. Why I didn't realize how bad it really did. Big difference there. I mean, it took two people to adjust those. It's usually somebody hanging off the side of it, with a sledgehammer, and somebody cranking on the wheel at the same time. Or we would take it back and up there and just pound the tar out of the top of it until it went down, or where we could get it pulled up and so, it was an extra challenge to get those, to move. And, is the new system we've got now is just so much better, so. Next slide. So. Project objectives, kind of like I was telling everybody today or whatever is, for the maybe irrigation district, for the ag users or whatever, it was management of water. But that being said, there was so many different uses, or shareholders and people that were affected by this, not only the, voters, environmentalists, fish. So it was a totally collaborative process to get this done. So much so that I didn't realize, I had a lot of opportunity to talk ag water to a lot of these people that didn't know ag water. But then, I learned so much more on, why Ken's so passionate about floating down the river and the fish and everything else. So it was a good learning experience for me. Next slide.
Wire after.
Yeah. I lost my voting virginity. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I've done it. I can actually say I've done it now, so. So as most of you have seen, just the remoteness of that, was just so incredible to get equipment in there and get done what we wanted to do, especially since we were doing it in the winter time. We were trying to be, to where we didn't have to shut our shareholders down because it was going to cost them money if we shut them down. And so, we did it in the winter time. And, as you all seen, it's a very remote spot. So next slide. All right, so this is definitely a Diana slide.
I made this slide. Well, it took some money to get this done. And we put this slide together originally just to show kind of the snowball effect of just some initial funding. Going back to a Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart grant for ditch lining, and there's actually a project before that even, but that was $75,000, and that was the first time the district had received some federal funding, and to get comfortable with that and to just figure out kind of all those processes and all the requirements around getting a grant. And it was the first one we really worked on together. Jennifer, was helping the district with managing that. So that was one of those small scale grants. So that was really important. And then funding, which included, sorry, this doesn't break out the Basin Roundtable piece. So that just kind of lumped in with CWCB, but there's, if you want to know after, we can break out the Basin Roundtable parts. So there was Basin Roundtable and CWC money in engineering and design. And so that was really critical funding to get started. And that let us, as Lauren said, we kind of kept going back. And so in the first place, we're like, okay, well, we don't know everything about the design yet, but we know we need automated head gates. So we went to CWCB and said, well, how about, a grant that's just focused on the automated head gates? And we started getting these smaller grants, and then prices of everything started going up in 2020 in a big way. And we realized we needed to start asking for bigger sums of money. So we went to CWCB and asked for 750,000. We went to the River District. We went to NRCS. And then we went back to the federal sources, and we were able to use the state money as match to the federal grants. And we got a Water Smart Bureau of Reclamation. It was the very first round of the Environmental Water Resources Projects and Program. And the support of the Basin Roundtable and the fact that the project had been identified in the IPP list was really a critical piece of the scoring. Because River Reclamation asked, is this a project that's already been identified by the community, is in a community plan? And, an attachment to the proposal was like a little screenshot of, the Basin Roundtable list saying it says Maybell there. So that was super important. That was exciting, we got the 1.9 million, then another cost estimate came back that the price had gone up even more. So then we were able to go to the Upper Colorado Endangered Fish Recovery Program, some bipartisan infrastructure law funding, and they gave another 2.8 million to the project. And that was what let us be able this past, it was just last summer that we were able to put the project out to bid, because at that point we were comfortable that we had enough funding. And then, as Mike said, we got JHL constructors on board, and JDB also served as construction managers. They were also our engineers. And with that, it started construction in September, and they were basically done by February, more or less. Yeah. So it was about 6 years of planning and fundraising, and not too long.
6 months for the work.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was our funding story, and it ended up being close over 80% public funds, and then the Nature Conservancy brought some private funding to the table as well. Oh, it's complicated. It's not a big budget, actually. The construction contract was 6.8 million. And then on top of that was the engineering and the construction management. Yeah. And who's the fiscal agent on like all these grants? The Nature Conservancy. And so you guys are doing that in grant management. So that's right. That's like a full-time job. Yeah, we have a very, very good grant manager.
Increase the cost.
Yeah. So get the road that they had to build to get basically down a sheer canyon. So the road was put in at what, like 30% grade. As well as trucking everything in. There was a helicopter cement pour at one point. Yeah.
The picture
Oh, there we
doesn't
go.
do
It doesn't do it justice.
Yeah, just walking down, that's pretty steep, so. So yeah, the remoteness is what caused us so much. And originally, they had concrete mixtures that were going down off that with tracks. And it was just too steep and too slick to do that, so they, and so they pivoted right then, said we gotta do something different, and they called the helicopters in. And, we did it, in January, I think, helicopters. They were running, like a ton of concrete every 3 minutes with that helicopter. They were reaching the speeds of 90 miles an hour with that helicopter. The crew down there below it was everything they could do to keep up with the guy. And then, of course, it was, I think that week it was, in the 30s or whatever, and it was spraying water on. I mean, just miserable day for them. But still, they got it done. And I guess an otter sat there on the ice and watched them all day. Yeah. So, can you move to the next slide? Yeah, and so they had some really awesome operators. They had one guy that, I've been in construction business for about 24 years, and I've seen a lot of good operators, but I've never seen anybody that could run a machine like that guy did. Just what they were able to do and how they placed those rocks underwater, above water, it didn't matter. They did a really good job. Enough so that, even the guys that were taking measurements, with instruments and stuff were really surprised how quick they were with it. So, next slide. So that's the back side of of course, the head gate. You can see the two pipes coming in through there, but it looks different, with it all covered up or whatever, but it just goes to show you how much of an angle that gate actually is compared to what it was. And that's been a really good sign.
And they're 60 grade pipes. Right?
Yeah. Yep. And that also kind of shows you how big a structure, somebody asked how deep it was, but that kind of gives you an idea. Next slide. Yeah, and actually that should say modernization is happiness instead of, because we are ecstatic with it. It is so nice, when somebody calls and says, hey, we've got too much water, or we don't have enough water, whatever, to just get on the computer and adjust it. And, it's been just really good for us. And I don't know if you heard, Dave mentioned today, about being able to control our tap water a lot better, and our shareholders are really happy because, when we do need, water, they've got it, or we can get it to them a lot quicker, and, we don't have a grumpy ditch rider having to run up there at 6 o'clock at night and try and find somebody to help him, so, it's been a really good thing for us.
Did you say that you were adjusted to as many as 18 times a day?
Well, we discovered when we did the wastegate down below that the water was actually adjusting within 5 CFS 18 times a day, just from the difference of the river. But no, we had, we tried not to adjust hardly ever because it was so much work. And so at times we were going up there maybe once a week. The big thing is when they released fish water, then we had to go up there a lot more just to make sure that we were taking fish water. We didn't adjust it near as much as we needed to just because it was such a thing. Next slide. So one of the great things I like about this is it's very aesthetic to the eye. I mean, it doesn't look like a big, they did a beautiful job as far as I'm concerned. When you're there, it looks, about as natural as you can be, as far as doing something like this. I was really pleased with where it turned out. Next slide. So, and then of course, like I said, our project team, and construction managers, like I said, a really good team. We did a really good job of putting together the right people to do it. Very passionate people about what they do and how they do it. Next slide. I'm going to leave this to Diana to discuss, the various partners that she dealt with.
Well, you can see that, it takes a village to replace a head gate. We were just so fortunate, from the Colorado Water Conservation Board, the Roundtable here, Friends of the Yampa, Moffett County, the Board of County Commissioner support was really instrumental. The right of way to access the project, because we couldn't use the way that we walked in today, because there's no way that big equipment could have, come across the ditch without ruining it. So we had to get right of way approval from BLM because you couldn't use your historic right of way. So BLM was, wonderful partner on getting all of that done. So Bureau of Reclamation funding, NRCS contributed important funding to the project and was very supportive of the project in general. American Whitewater with, again, wanting to make sure that the boat passage part of the project worked properly. Colorado Cattlemen's provided support letters. We got a little extra. The NEPA process took a little longer, took a little more money than we had expected as usual. The Yampa River Fund chipped in a little extra NEPA funding. Upper Colorado River Endangered Fish Recovery Program was super supportive. This is all within endangered fish habitat. And so when our cost estimate went way up, chipped in that last big amount. And the River District was also extremely supportive through their community partnership program and that funding, and their funding is particularly flexible. And so that was, really helpful as well. Where like federal funding is a little less flexible. So yeah, so you all got to see it. It's up and running, and we got permission today from BLM to just go ahead with this reseeding of the roads, and the final reclamation will get done, and we'll check all the last boxes, I think, this fall.
Yep, I think we're dang near there. Dang near there. So, appreciate everybody's help on it in this room. Thank you.
I just remember when Jeff Blakesley and Mike brought this to our grants committee meeting. And they sat down and they wanted $75,000 to start the engineering on this. And we were a little hesitant, and then we asked Jeff Blakesley, so what do you think this project's gonna cost? And he says, $2 million. And I think my jaw hit the table. And I went, where are you gonna find people that are gonna invest $2 million in this? And he said, I got the money. Okay, well, you can get the grant. And he was right, although he made a lot of promises before he retired. But yeah, it's a long time coming. I remember we probably heard that original engineering grant in 2017. So it's been 7 years in the making.
And I love Jeff, but when I started with the Nature Conservancy in 2019, there was not $2 million in the account that said Maybell.
Well, I think one of the beauties is the fact that your tailwater has gone to almost nothing, where it used to be a substantial amount of water. So this in the tailwater, so yeah, the ability to very responsibly manage what you need and not just have to figure that the return flow will eventually get there.
I think it was one of our first IPPs as well.
It had a pretty low number to it.
It's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
It's a testament in the collaborative effort that the trust that the ranching community have with the environmental. When we started this gig 20 years ago, we could barely sit in the same room together. And here you are working together and having trust with the Nature Conservancy, which was a huge leap of faith for the ranching community. And it's just a great, example that it can work. I'm sure there was roadblocks involved.
Oh, yeah, there was. And I said this on a meeting the other day, we were very concerned about that when we first got started, but once we got them in the same room and sat down and started discussing things, everybody's values were the same. So it worked better than I thought it would. Let's put it that way. I had my reservations like too. And I'm not saying we still don't have a couple of shareholders or, we're naysayers. But I think that's just them by nature. You got something to just, they don't have a word. But yeah, the shareholders are pretty happy with what we got. And I hope the Nature Conservancy is happy with working with this opportunity. Yeah, it's been a good project. Next time we got to figure out how to get paid. The volunteers.
Did you miss after the boss?
I missed that day.
Okay, anybody have questions for Mike?
What are the water rights that you can there with the quantity?
We have 129 CFS allotments, but we don't, like today was what, 53 is what they told us? 59 CFS.
Yeah.
During peak season, we're running anywhere from 85 to 100, 85 to 95. But, on average, I think we're around 75. We're like the largest ag holding. So, and then, you know, the ditch stretches to Mayville major, whatever, and that's where they take all the major range from fish water and so on. That tailwater is pretty important. Right there.
Anybody else? Anybody online? Have a question?
Congratulations. Good job.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you do? Make sure you get paid. Thank you.
Yeah.
You can come down there and see the snake ranch anytime you want.
We did have a couple of visitors.
Okay, so hearing none, thanks, Mike, and Rebecca, update on dredge and fill legislation.
And if I could get permission to share my screen, that'd be great. It's a little easier to explain PowerPoint. Although I do apologize because this is going to be fairly boring compared to the main time version. Try not to push you guys to sleep here. So. All right, yeah, so Steve asked me to talk today about the bill that I'm sure you guys are all aware of, the dredge and fill permit program that was established by the state of Colorado through House Bill 24-1379. I have it with me, it's 32 pages. It's not too hard to get through. That being said, there's a lot of background information and a lot of things that go into this. So this is going to be a really brief overview. So feel free to ask questions if you have clarifications or you're confused about something. But it's a lot of information. So I'll try to keep it concise. So I just want to start out by talking about a little bit of the background, why this was a necessary thing, or why the state of Colorado thought this was a necessary thing to put through the legislature, what House Bill 1379 does, what the scope of it is, talk about exclusions and exemptions, how the authorizations work, and then talk about what's going to happen now that this bill went through. So as background, and you guys are probably, a lot of you are probably very aware of this, the Clean Water Act gives the Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers authority to protect navigable waters, which in the Clean Water Act is defined as waters of the United States, including the territorial seas. Of course, that's incredibly ambiguous, and that definition has been battled around by Supreme Courts and by presidential administrations, especially in the past 20 years, and that's part of why we are where we are today. Those protections in the Clean Water Act have historically been administered through the Environmental Protection Agency, the Army Corps of Engineers, but there is a provision that gives states and tribes the authority to assume administration of those protection programs if they choose. And what we're focused on today is dredge and fill protection, and that is established through Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, which establishes the programs to regulate, discharge, and dredge or fill materials into waters of the U.S. So how did we get here? In Colorado, state waters are defined as any and all surface and subsurface waters which are contained in or flow in or through the state, which of course is really broad. It's just any water in Colorado is state water. The federal definition, of course, being more ambiguous, historically has been kind of battled around in where that definition lies. But in May of 2023, in the second EPA court case, that definition was really narrowed and really drawn back in terms of what jurisdictional scope the federal government had for water quality protection with dredge and fill. And so when that happened, you can see this blue circle is where state waters lie, all encompassing. Prior to the Sackett administration or the Sackett ruling, this green was where all the federal jurisdictions lie, not quite as expansive as state waters, but almost everything. And then
packet, it was just this yellow, so the federal protection scope really narrowed. And so the state of Colorado said, well, we would actually really like our waters to be protected at least at this green level. And so they were calling that gap between the yellow and the edge of the green band, Sackett Gap waters. And the state of Colorado said we really want these to be protected. And so that is why House Bill 24-1379 was passed in June of 2024. And this bill is regular or requires the Water Quality Control Commission, which is the board that oversees the state's water quality staff, called the Water Quality Control Division. It required them to promulgate rules for this dredge and fill permit program. And then it requires the Water Quality Control Division to administer and enforce authorizations for dredge and fill activities, essentially oversee and approve or deny permits for dredge and fill. I will say the River District was pretty involved in this bill, as was a lot of different organizations and groups in the session this year. It was definitely one of the big topics for water bills. And one of the things that, Western Slope entities, including the River District, were asking for is a provision for Western Slope staff. That's something that's been available through the Army Corps with dredge and fill permit programs, and that was something that was really important. And so there is a provision in there that the division may allow, depending on resources, for there to be at least one staff person through this program on the West Slope. A really hot topic in creating this bill between parties was the scope of what these protections were going to entail. Kind of the two sides of it were all of state waters or just those Sackett Gap waters, what was protected previously that is no longer protected post Sackett. And in this bill, the scope is all Colorado state waters. However, there are a lot of exclusions, so it's not really all state waters. There are exclusions that exclude certain types of water from regulatory requirements. And then, of course, as was also the case with the federal jurisdiction prior to the Sackett ruling, there are a lot of exceptions. So not every dredge and fill activity requires the dredge and fill permit. Or the big permit, it could be a general authorization. And so those are two important things to note in this as well. The first one is those exclusions for certain types of waters. There's a lot listed here. Groundwaters, of course, the big one. Ditches and canals are excluded. Stormwater control features, artificially irrigated acres, artificial lakes, lagoons, or ponds. Wetlands that are adjacent to and supported by a ditch or canal, meaning that they would not be wetlands, there was not a ditch there. Recharge facilities, artificial reflecting or swimming pools or ornamental bodies of water, water-filled depressions created upland, even in a gravel pit kind of thing. Swales and erosional features, groundwater prior converted upland. And these are spelled out in better detail in the bill. And then the exemptions are, pretty broad. Just that. I tried to include them all here, but if you're interested in these, I would read the bill. It's a pretty hard to read through list. It has a lot of detail. But as has historically been the case with dredge and fill, there are a lot of agricultural exemptions. There's exemptions for construction and maintenance of farm ponds. You don't need a dredge and fill permit for that. For farm roads, for forest roads, there's exemptions for maintenance of drainage ditches, or things like dams and levees, water reuse facilities, or wastewater facilities and water treatment plants. And then, there's exemptions for like normal farming activities, exemptions for wildlife habitat management activities. There's a lot of different exemptions, so if you're curious, look at those. And then to kind of talk a little bit about that, back to the scope of the bill had the scope of all state waters and not just the Sackett Gap waters, which was a pretty contentious thing when it was in the legislature.
legislature. And one of the kind of compromises that came out of that was granting the authority for a general authorization for any isolated waters. And what that means is essentially kind of like a fast track permit. With the dredge and fill permitting program, individual authorization is like the permit that you would need to get if you're doing something like building diversion structure in the Yampa River. You're gonna need an individual authorization. It's a big project. You're gonna have impacts. You're gonna have to have an individual authorization permit. But if you're doing a project that, you know, is for a category of activity similar in nature and similar impact on quality of state waters, or maybe has minimal adverse impact on those waters, you may be able to get a general authorization. This was also true with the Army Corps federal permit, and it's part of this state program. And their compromise was that, you know, some groups were upset about having the scope broader than the federal jurisdiction previously. And so the compromise was that for isolated waters, that there would be a general authorization. And so the division has the authority to issue a statewide general authorization for dredge and fill activities in isolated state waters. And these isolated state waters could be isolated wetland, isolated ponds and impoundments, or isolated ordinary high water mark reaches. It's important to note that this does not include fens or peatland or kettle pond, as those are ecologically important areas. And to kind of lay this out, I had some fun with making shapes today. So prior to the Colorado program, it was a little bit more ambiguous on these isolated waters. Do you or do you not need a permit? And so prior, if you were within the FEMA 100-year floodplain, you had that wet, isolated water, maybe a wetland or something in that FEMA 100-year floodplain, you definitely needed a permit. But if you were outside of that FEMA 100-year floodplain, maybe not, probably not. But then if there wasn't a FEMA 100-year floodplain, that's when you really get into ambiguous territory. There's no FEMA flood map available. Then the rule was if you're within 4,000 feet up to the significant nexus test, which means do you have a significant nexus to the waters of the US? And that is a really difficult thing to determine and establish. And so it was very frustrating for people to figure out if they needed a permit within that 4,000 feet or not. And so the Colorado program is a little bit different. It grants a general authorization. If you have a FEMA 100-year floodplain, again, you're within that FEMA 100-year floodplain, you need to get an individual authorization. You're outside of the FEMA 100-year floodplain, you're an isolated wetland, you're good with a general authorization. If there's no FEMA flood map available, if you're in 1,500 feet, then you need an individual authorization. But if you're outside of 1,500 feet, there's a general authorization, basically meaning that there's just not the ambiguity of not knowing. If you're outside of 1,500 feet, you're good with the general authorization. As long as it is not fen, remember that fen would still probably not a good thing to disturb that fen. And then if there is some limitations, there still needs to be best management practices, and there's some limitations on the size of how big that project is. So that's a little bit complicated, but essentially, you know, what's happening now, right now we're still under the division Clean Water Policy 17, which is essentially exercising enforcement discretion on dredge and fill activities. You know, saying best management practices should be in effect, but you know, there's a little bit of kind of a no man's land for what's happening right now with those permits. The Water Quality Control Division is drafting an implementation plan for how this is going to affect. And they just released recently a full list of dates for stakeholder engagements for this new regulation 87. The first one of those is on September 4th. I think they have 6 this year, this fall and winter, and then another 11 or 12 next year. And then they'll have a rulemaking hearing to formally establish those rules. Probably some late fall next year. It'll be before the end of the year.
they're required to finish that by the end of December next year. So that's a lot of information, but happy to answer questions.
Rebecca, that West Slope staffing position, filled yet, is that correct?
To my knowledge, they haven't started hiring anyone to this for this. I haven't heard anything, so hopefully they're gonna. But yeah. Yeah, I guess another thing to know, Charlie, do you remember how much funding was put into this? It was. I don't remember off the top of my head. There was. Yeah, it wasn't an incredible amount of funding. I think they're probably gonna have to up it in future years to really keep the program going, but yeah.
They're really gonna hire those people
Were they gonna hire?
to hold, to mediate those people.
Yeah, so that's a good question. It kind of runs through the water quality control division. I've been to the stakeholder meeting before and the water quality control division kind of fronts them generally for other regulations that I've attended. And it's an opportunity for like discussion and for, you know, technical experts to provide opinion for expertise. Or public comments. You know.
Go ahead, Will. Do you get a sense on how the enforcement's gonna be for this? I mean, like some penalties for, I mean, is it getting pretty severe? You have any sense at all what you're reading?
I don't remember that part, and I'm sure it's laid out in the bill. I don't remember. Yeah, I mean, penalties I think are somewhat severe with the federal jurisdiction. I mean, I think generally it's always a good idea to call and ask, make sure you got your ducks in a row. Yeah. Yeah.
Beck, it seems like there are an awful lot of exemptions and exclusions.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of give us some examples of things, well, you talked about like a new diversion structure
Mm-hmm.
in the Yampa. That seems far-fetched because that's not gonna happen.
Kind of went for an extreme example.
But what about reconstruction of it? What about reconstruction of an existing diversion as an example?
Yeah, well, I'm sure you guys have to get a 404 permit for that. No, she's a good technical exemption. Oh, I see, an ag exemption, yeah.
Go through a fourth review to
Right,
establish
yes.
your ag status.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so in that case, they did not have to get a 404 permit because it was an ag exemption. It kind of depends on what activity you're doing. You know, like if you're doing something that's pretty minimal, let's say you're putting in a boat ramp. That's not a huge impact on, you know, how much like fill material you're putting in, so that's probably going to be like a general
So-
observation.
But I guess that's my question, Rebecca. So do we just judge? So like 4 or 5 years ago, the 3 ranches that share one ditch up on Fish Creek, not the famous Fish Creek, the not famous Fish Creek. We needed to rebuild our head gates. We needed a splash wall and a diversion, and actually the measurement class was already there. So we just got together, we came up with $7,500. We didn't ask anybody. We just built things, tore the old one out, built a new one. Is it our judgment that we're not doing anything significant?
I mean, again, that probably would also fall under an ag exemption. But I think that was part of the reason why we thought Western Slope staff was so important. To have access to being able to ask those questions when you're like, I think this is a permit activity and I need to talk to someone about it. Or I'm pretty sure this is an exemption and I want to make sure.
Or I'm pretty sure it's an exemption and I don't want to make it. Exactly.
Yeah. Per Will's question. Yeah.
The Maybell ditch, nobody would have ever noticed.
Yeah, I mean, the exemptions get really complicated. You know, it's a good portion of that, it's several pages
Beaches that are exemptions, and it's more complex than my list, because it's not just saying like, oh, ditches, it's like ditches, if such and such, this and this and this, it's legal. And I'm not a lawyer, so I certainly wouldn't want to say yay or nay on a certain activity. But yeah, it's very complicated.
Doesn't seem too practical to some people, it's real fun back.
But they live on the not so famous suburb.
But they do live on that very famous street, right?
My whole concern with this deal when it came through is, it is so complicated, because I help with all of the tag exemption and stuff. I see somebody getting in trouble with the thing, I really do, I see a lot of complications with it. So I'm curious to see, what's gonna happen with the next thing.
It's certainly gonna be a huge learning curve. It's a really big program to undertake. And so, yeah, it's a big bite. They're biting off a lot this year with the permit program. I certainly have no jealousy for the people they're hiring, so we'll proceed.
I see some losses. We'll see, time will tell.
One advice is, put a pond in your backyard, better buy some cows, good with it.
Dog ponds are an exemption. Dog ponds. They don't work out.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds like the draft on white water.
Anybody online have a question for Rebecca? Alden and Alden?
Thank you. I don't know if my camera's working or not, so I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. That's the biggest thing. This is more of a comment than a question. I've worked with the River District and several other agencies, with the state going through this, and there's one common theme that I think folks need to kind of at least be aware of, is in Rebecca's presentation, which is very thorough and takes it at a higher level, but it really gives you the nuts and bolts of it. But there's one common problem to where, the state says that they have primacy over the water. However, when you're visiting with the Army Corps, that's not what they say. Those are waters of the US. So that's one thing at some point, I think as a group, we may need to take heed, because we do have a discrepancy about who has jurisdiction over that water. Is it state or federal water? As far as I know, it's state water. But boy, the feds sure do think they have an awful lot of control over what you can and can't do with it. Almost to the point to where they like to be in the planning and zoning committees for what goes on throughout our state. So, and I was a pretty strong opponent against this. But I'm really happy to see kind of how this came about. I still think there's some things we can improve upon, but the one lingering piece is just, who has primacy over that water? So it's just something as you kind of keep cruising through this and you learn more about it, keep that in the back of your mind, folks.
Good point.
Okay, thanks, Alden. Doug?
So just a quick comment. So I'll echo what Mr. Vandenbrink said. Alden and myself and also Tom Gray were pretty hard against the bill and against the specifics of it and the rest, and making sure I still continue to believe I'm very comfortable with where we got to where we are at, but it wasn't about water quality. It's about control of the public's control of what we can do in our private lands. And I bring up a specific thing, the beaver analog on an ephemeral stream. So what and who and what are we going to do there? So I don't know. I think it was a knee-jerk reaction by the D's, myself, and I'm still, what we got here is acceptable. I think we still have some tweaks to do with it, but I was against it, and and again, when did we all become scientists here, you know, in the water quality, you know? So we're all scientists now. We're gonna get the legislature to provide the sciences for us. So anyhow, enough said. Again, I think it was an overreach. I think, but I'm happy we got where we're at in exempting ag activities. And, you know, it just goes to show, you know, and I'm sorry to all the liberal friends that are out there, but it just, you know, shoot, shovel and shut up, you know, or don't tell anything, you know. I didn't do nothing. I didn't do nothing. I didn't see.
All right.
I guess you was not up.
Somebody called me.
First thing.
All right, sirens at Doug's place on the way home.
All right, well, thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks, Rebecca.
So I just want to note there on item 10, action items, that there were really none expected other than the normals, approving the agenda and the minutes, that sort of thing.
Just one, Rebecca, didn't you want to bring to our attention that Shoshone's raised 54 million?
That in later.
Yeah,
Oh, you're gonna, oh,
I'm presenting twice.
You guys are ready for this, man? All right.
Sorry, we're really working on it.
thank you for reminding me.
Okay, so roundtable projects and committees, Big River Committee, IBCC, Ken and Jeff.
Sally, do you have that? I sent you the paper version of that earlier presentation.
PowerPoint, the progress report?
Nope, that's not it.
No?
No. That's Mindy's. Oh, this is Mindy's.
What's it called?
It's called, ERC IBCC update.
You sent it to me, it's not in the packet.
Yeah, you should have it, but just launch the one from the Big River Committee.
Yeah, it wasn't the same one. I think it was in your email.
The one that we use for the Big River meeting. And you put it in the spam filter? Oh, boy. Well, while she's doing that, the Big River update is really brief. There's not a lot happening and seven people have already said in the Colorado River negotiations, there's not a lot new. The next UCRC meeting will be focused on that, or at least some substantial part of that. And in the meantime, sounds like the Colorado River webinar will happen right around the first part of August, so we'll get some more news on that by September. And you know, we've been really fortunate to have a good connection with Amy from the DNR. She helps us a lot to understand those things, so she kind of keeps us abreast of anything that's going to happen. The one Big River thing that we should make you aware of is the UCRC has a second bucket of Bureau grant funding available, which is called bucket 2, and there are 2 parts to that, and one of them is a fairly near-term thing. It's the B2E, the bucket 2 for environmental. I don't know, Jonathan, you want to say just a couple of words about that real quick?
My understanding is projects that are environmental or ecosystem focused that will lead to water conservation and for the expansion benefits, the multiple benefits from that water. So things like fish passage on irrigation structure, you know, these types of things like that, Maybell irrigation, which we probably fit in there, you know, protects the river, makes better use of the water. Like Ken mentioned, those tailwaters, and also takes into boating and fish passage. So that forest work, riparian restoration.
And those things are fairly near term, so I think it's incumbent on us to just use the communication methods that we have from the roundtable to keep you posted. There are going to be some changes, and we'll try to keep you posted on how the request for applications is flowing, what the process is. Jules kind of dialed into that. Somehow we'll make sure that you all hear, so nobody goes in September, gee whiz, it's all the money got spent. I didn't know anything about that. So we just want to make sure that you didn't, there'll be a later cycle for B2W water, which are long-term conservation projects. That's gonna happen later in the fall. So that's really about it for the big river.
30 to 50 million, I think. What
Yeah.
number? That's a big number.
Fair bit of money, $30 to $50 million. So we'll try to keep posted, yeah.
Is there a main point of contact at the UCRC for those bucket 2 funds?
No, if there is, we don't know who that is, but that's one of the things we're gonna try to find out and make sure that you know.
Thanks.
So that's kind of on us to keep everybody in the round table up to date. Okay, with that, I think I'm gonna hand it over to Ken for the IBCC, unless there are more questions about Big River. Okay. Okay, why don't we run down to those criteria real quick? So you remember last week when we talked about, or last 2 months ago, anyway, we talked about different projects, topics, themes that we could work on collectively at the roundtable as through the IBCC with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And we did a roundtable and we talked about, everybody expressed off of that list of about a dozen things. What were those topics that sort of appealed to you individually or thought that they were appropriate for the roundtable? That's evolved some. The IBCC meeting down in Durango 2 weeks ago really focused on trying to pare that down and then try to get a series of breakout groups to try to identify a process by which how we would do that. How do you take this? In fact, that was the question at the Big River Committee is like, so how are we gonna take this and refine it down and all agree on it all statewide and coordinate with the Colorado Water Conservation Board? It won't be easy. It's a challenge, but we heard Lauren's up to the challenge, and I think we are as well. But through that process, using Forest Health as a straw man, we tried to come up with a process that would facilitate that discussion and that interaction about how we would address Forest Health through our roundtable and in our area. And then we would share what we've learned or what were some of the obstacles that we were running into that the Colorado Water Conservation Board could assist us or that we could learn through the IBCC from other basins, what they're doing, what could they teach us? But in order to be part of that whole process, what we really wanted to do is identify, we wanted to pick up on a document that was done back in 2013 called the No and Low Regrets 2.0. So this will probably help us identify what these topics might be. I keep describing them as kind of a basket that we would put different things into. And eventually we would choose either a few that we'll all collectively work on, or that we would say, well, you as a basin should try to choose at least 1 or 2 of these, and work on them yourself, and then share this. The C9 Summit being a logical place to come back and share what we know and what we've learned about this. So that's the No and Low Regrets 2.0 is, you're gonna hear a lot about that in the next year. And certainly a lot about that at the C9 Summit. In order to qualify for those, there's a list of qualifications. So can you take us down to? Yes, right here we go. These 9 qualities. Oh, go back. How do you get it? Now, oh, anyway. So these 9 qualities, I'm gonna read them to you. You can read. But these are the 9 qualities that we like to try to have these various things that we put into the No and Low Regrets. They should meet these criteria. And you may not have all of the money figured out, and every basin may not be a complete concurrence on this, but would be generally a consensus that this is an important topic, like forest health. But that's a big topic and it's a lot of different vectors.
in it. So it's not like a real simple thing, and we would probably have a number of different approaches that we would learn about from different parts of the state, depending on the challenges that they had individually. So using these types of criteria as things that would be necessary to consider putting, now we'll move to the next slide. So here we have these action items, potentially, this list here, we'll make this just a little bigger so you can all see it. I have to stand here so that I can see it. And these are the topics that we want to hear a little bit more. This is the same list that we went through last time, and you gave us some feedback. But where we're at right now is at the end of the IBCC meeting, we had used forest health as a straw man, but decided to come back to measurements and using the airborne snow observatory, the flights that we saw take place this year, or the Colorado Airborne Snow Measurement group that coordinates all of the different groups that are working on this program here in the state. What is that a program that we see value in? Is that something that we think has the collection of that data and our ability to interpret that and help us forecast how we operate our reservoirs, how we report to the lower basin and to the UCRC about our water availability and the amount of water we use? Is that an important topic? Well, the IBCC thought that was a good place to start. So that's the first part of the presentation I'm going to do today is to get some quick feedback from everybody on, is this a good idea? Is this a terrible idea? Or you're not sure it needs to be maybe thought about a little bit longer. So this is a topic you're going to hear more about at the C9 Summit. So why don't we just start and get a quick idea from people? Why do you think, is this the Airborne Snow Observatory gathering of more accurate data on snowpack, our reservoir? Was that an important thing to recommend to the Colorado Water Conservation Board? That they should see if they can scale this or make sure that we follow the latest technology, maybe a satellite technology that's going to be able to provide this type of data. And
can I ask just a catch-up question here, because I'm somewhat new to this process. So when you say we should recommend to the CWCB to do all these things for the CWCB to fund these programs, or for them to somehow
to investigate it, because I think they have the ability to approach the Bureau of Reclamation through the UCRC and say, this is an important thing to the state of Colorado. Our roundtables and our conservation board think that this is something that you need to be supporting as part of your support for the Upper Basin states and their ability to comply with Colorado River Compact.
So in partial answer to your question, could you scroll back to the 9 factors? Okay,
Yeah, right there.
So I really like the way you introduced this in the last meeting, a lot better than the way you introduced it just now.
Well,
Here's the idea. The goal of the no and low regret strategy is to try to make the IBCC a better connective tissue, that's what Lauren called it, between CWCB and the roundtable. So it's kind of trying to make a bi-directional path to bring ideas that could maybe cross basins, just make a more effective communication infrastructure there. And those 9 things that used to be on the
they'll be back
presentation there include having a pretty good idea where the money's gonna come from. We don't want to start talking about stuff that we have absolutely no way of funding.
Right, so
That'd be something we wouldn't put in low and no regrets. But if it was of interest, if broad support, if CWCB could get a rope around it, if the money, even if it wasn't exactly available, was kind of there, if we had an agency to provide the lead, all those criteria, then it belongs in that low and no regret strategy. So it's kind of, Andy, it's kind of like trying to find some low hanging fruit that we can use to build out that communication infrastructure. that okay?
Yep, I'm not sure you picked the right example.
Okay.
And here, I'll clarify my answer there. You know, we worked with the Airborne Snow Observatory project in the upper Yampa Basin all this year for the first time. That funding was completely provided by the UCRC this time around. So that's $500,000. Just to put a number on it, so everybody knows what that costs. And that's for the Elk Basin and the Yampa River of Small Steamboat Springs. So that's what $500,000 per season gets you. It's undoubtedly powerful data. It's really, you know, if you're gonna talk about water management, snow data, that makes a water nerd super excited. It's amazing what you can do. One of the questions that our organization asked ourselves is, okay, $500,000 per year, one, where is the money coming from? So that's why I asked that question. Are we trying to say to the CB, go find $500,000 every year to do this? And then also it comes down to what decisions are being made with the data. So you can have amazing data, and I'm a big fan of data for data's sakes, you know, for scientific advancement and knowledge. But I think the other part of the question is what sort of decisions are being made with this very powerful data? And then is there an alternative that gets you close, that still informs that decision, but may use a different methodology at a lower cost? And I'm not sure the ASO right now is one size fits all for all the basins. And I question whether if the IBC says all the state needs this, it may force, you know, a lot of stress on some smaller basins or some smaller user groups to say, oh my gosh, I need $500,000 now to keep up with everyone. And you could end up creating sort of haves and have-nots on a decision-making tool that is powerful. It can have a lot of use, but I'm not sure that's all been well thought out yet. That being said, we did apply to get funding for 2 more years of ASO flights in Upper Basin because we also have a simultaneous program with the USGS where they're running a different model called the snow model for the basin from Elkhead Creek all the way up. And that is more in like the $50,000 a year range. It takes 3 years to get the whole study up and running and to perform your process, whereas ASO is much quicker. So it's a little more complex than just this is a good idea or not.
So Andy's response, what I'm asking all of you to be willing to contribute. And first of all, I've said ASO because I wanted you to have a context, but the IBCC is using CASM, Colorado Airborne Snow Measurement Group, that want to learn more about the snowpack in the state and the impact that it has on, especially the Trans Mountain Diversion projects, but just, you know, what does our water supply look like in our high country? So the question number one of you, like Andy just answered, you know, is collecting a lot of additional data on our snowpack an important thing for us as roundtables and the Colorado Water Conservation Board to focus on? That's one of the 2 questions that I'm been sent here to ask you tonight. Frank.
I just raised my hand and I was thinking, should I have done it?
Everybody's supposed to say something.
I'd be careful here because I echo what Andy just said. We were part of the process. We worked with Upper Yampa. They asked us to identify a few of the nodes, if you will. And those were in my basin, not my basin, the basin that all the water comes that supplies the city of Steamboat Springs. I was watching the very fancy app of the plane as it flew, which was really cool. I got the data. I went through it, but I have to be honest with you, that data didn't change anything that I did this year, or would it change anything I've done in the past? It may not change anything I'm doing in the future. Now, the reason I say that is the reservoir that supplies the city of Steamboat Springs fills every year. It's very, very rare that it wouldn't fill. We'd have to have many years in a row of drought for it not to fill. If I have had a bigger reservoir, it may be more helpful, but, I support the program. But at a level of $500,000, it would be hard for me to go to my board and say, we need $50,000, $7,500,000 to support this program. That's where I'm at right now.
That's great feedback. That's exactly the type of feedback we're trying to gather. Is there anybody with a substantially different opinion?
I was there at the Big River Committee and some of the things that you guys did. I was curious what Andy was gonna say about it because it was really cool data and it was fun to open it and look at it. We, at the city, we didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, I
In
might,
terms of decision making.
I know a lot
Yeah.
of people have something to say, but just to follow up a little bit, I also don't think we know the full potential of that data yet.
I know.
Yeah.
There's so much of it there, because we're thinking in, historical decision-making processes. How much is water coming when? Not the full extent of how do we manage, especially in this basin, the original reservoir, which is the watershed that contributes to it. So I think there's a whole nother realm, decision-making, policy and actions that can be informed by this data that we haven't let ourselves apply it to yet, because we're so focused on the traditional mechanisms of moving water in the system, reservoirs, stream gauges, things like that. There's a whole bunch, I think you don't even know how to use it.
Yeah, because I mean, gathering data, I mean, we're really happy that the USGS has been gathering stream gauge data for how many decades? Kent and then Jonathan.
Yeah, to feedback from Julie, in the Big River, we were having the same conversations with you, like, it's new, definitely makes sense in some ways, gathering data is important. Snow tell is a little outdated. We know from several years ago, we had great snowpack, but none of it made its way to Lake Powell. So maybe this can help judge those decisions, and in certain basins beyond our very wet basin here in small reservoirs up top, they might need it a lot more than us because their reservoirs don't always, or downriver, it might help. I think it'd be an interesting thing to do for a few years to see if it's worthy enough, or in select places that are the most important. Doing it across the state sounds like a crazy expense.
Thanks for that input, Jonathan. And then Kelly?
Yeah, it seems to me, and like I've mentioned at the Big River, questioning the utility of it, and it sounds like the folks that used it, there's need, but maybe it didn't adjust to your management so much. And I bet you that would come with time as you become more familiar. But in my mind, it seems like we know so little about the factors and the aspects that snowpack is sitting on top of. The soil, the vegetation treatments, the watersheds themselves, the conveyance ways. I think $500,000 put towards a ecological forest study would be more valuable than knowing how much snow is on top. Because you can get that information, not with that level of detail, but through personal observations, the snow tell, which we know are spotty, but we have enough to know what the snowpack is looking like. What we don't know is why you could have 2 years of the same snowpack with totally different runoff scenarios that come with it. And we all have our guesses. We say it was a dry fall, it was, this and that, but we don't, that's the data that we're missing. It's not just depth of snow and snow density, but what's happening in that interface between that snow and the soil, where that snow becomes moisture, and then it becomes I think that's where the investigation.
So maybe we throw in soil moisture as another one of the things that we think is important to be gathering along with snow depth. Ollie, and then if there's anybody else in here that's got a different opinion or wants to bring it out a different part of this, let me know. But then we are trying to be done by 8:30, and I'm gonna run over on my time. So Ollie, and then Andy.
Yeah,
So I guess, depends on how you frame the question. Is it important? Yes. Is it the most important thing? In my opinion, no.
Okay.
I go back and I think that we've all come to there's a lot more focus, and for a good reason, on forest health and how that impacts our water supply.
I'd rather have CWCB focusing on how to get us more water. And in my opinion, that's through improving forest health. And I,
Perfect segue.
and I know, I mean, we were just having this conversation, how do you affect forest health? It's a daunting task, even just in the White River, given the state of our forest at this point.
Yeah, period.
It has taken us 50 to 75 years to get in the mess we're in with the forest. It's gonna take us a while to get out of it. So if we can get focused on improving that reservoir, because then truly that's where our water storage is in the state. That's where I would like to see us spend a lot of time and focus.
Excellent, excellent.
Just
Andy?
one thing to say, the data without a new tool to go along with it for practitioners to use.
Yeah.
Isn't gonna have the effect I think that people hope.
Good comment. Yeah. Okay.
So there's gotta be that tool that goes with it.
Okay, any other comment on the snow measurement? Okay, so then the segue is what Polly said is forest health. So she led off with that. That's a topic that she thinks is more important, more relevant for us to bring back and say from the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable, we think the forest health maybe has an even bigger impact in taking care of the forest health and improving that forest as a sponge for our water supply. Are you in agreement? Do you have a different topic? Funding was really popular when we did this 2 months ago. But we know that sports gambling is gonna continue to bring in additional money for the state water plan. I mean, there's never too much money, but I think that maybe the relevance of the forest health that's sort of where my own personal opinion is, but what else? What other ideas do you have here? I mean, you got CWCB directors sitting here. Come on, she's all ears.
I hate to be Debbie Downer, but I'm so good at it. Every time Pat O'Toole talked about forest health.
Yeah.
My eyes kind of rolled back. And so Kelly, if you look at the 9 criteria here.
Your eyes are rolling back.
If you look at the 9 criteria here, I can think of a bunch of those, 3 or 4 or 5 that forest health doesn't really need. I mean, it seems to me if that's the thing we're gonna drill into, we got a lot of work to do before that comes in the category of low hanging fruit.
Can I ask you a question to follow up on your sentiment there? Is it because forest health as a subject is too general and too broad? In that maybe we just need to specify that forest health as it supports the hydrograph or maintain snowpack? Is that a better way to get you closer?
Does the CWCB staff and have resources to support that discussion? Does it create a feedback loop? Is it right for IBCC action? You think it is?
Should we not be locating?
I don't even know what thread to pull on. I don't know where to start.
Help fund local projects that are going after improving the forest. I mean, isn't that what we're talking about, is helping to, where's our focus? CWCB already has the fire priority watershed. Yeah.
It's already a high priority for the DNR, I would say.
So let's not change directions. I mean, I'm hearing, I mean, there may be something else, but if I'm comparing forestry and the data collection and just, and I see the possibility of more water, I'm just gonna say in the White River Basin, that forest is the only hope we've got. That's what I'm saying. That's our only hope to improve our water supply.
Julie?
Well, I was just gonna say, if you think about, I mean, what we're looking for is no regrets planning. There's really no regrets for ourselves, right? But there's only benefits, so.
And many other
You
benefits.
know, we wouldn't look back in 10 years and be like, why did we spend our money before, so.
Yeah.
And then Will?
Oh, right.
I do like the soil moisture sensor program that CW3 is doing along with other folks. That's data. Expanding that.
And it's a big need in the state right now,
It
too.
sure is.
Will?
So, yeah, I'm kind of with you on that, like Jonathan mentioned. soil moisture, that's another thing you can correlate to snowpack. Transit losses is another piece of the equation. I guess philosophically, I'm kind of want to know what Jeff is kind of saying here, because I've asked Jonathan this, and I've asked Kelly this just now, I'm like, I can't get my head around sometimes, like, how you can actually improve the forest so much that you can squeeze more, how can you be effective with squeezing more water out of it? So like, I know there's ways, but pragmatically, sometimes I'm not seeing it, but what I am seeing is kind of a trend of kind of like water conservation, kind of drifting over towards like forest improvement. I mean, that's good, it's great, but it's kind of diverging from what our kind of, maybe some of our goals are here. I mean, do you know what I'm saying, Jeff?
I know exactly what you're saying. So maybe it's just that we got more work to do at the board level before we can say that this is a thing that fits the low regrets, no regrets framework.
Jonathan, then just without digging too into the conversation there, but I would say if we know all of our water comes from the headwaters, but what we're saying right now is we have no idea why or how to deal with it. I would say that alone is the reason why we need to pour every single resource we have into understanding why and how our water comes from its sole source. You know, if we don't understand the headwater system and we don't want to invest in trying to improve it or understand it, then we're always just going to be completely subject to a mysterious quantity that changes every year and try to build our entire civilization on it. That seems absurdly risky.
What was the enabling language of the U.S. Forest Service was to take care of our water supply.
And so we know that that's where it comes, and we know that there's ways to increase snowpack through forest treatments to improve soil health is what I would focus more as. I think you're right, forest health has a generality that's hard to capture, but soil health is one that can transport water, it can store water, and it can send water down when necessary. I bet you have a lot more technical.
We're not gonna get too technical.
Okay, we're gonna have to wrap this up here. Help me out.
One thing I would say is not to think of, if you're gonna try to do some sort of forestry projects, is not thinking about squeezing more water out of what's up there, but maintaining its productivity and not losing it, because they are drying. You know, things are getting less productive in certain areas of the forest. And I think maybe there's a little bit of a construct fault here where you could almost say you need both of those things. You know, if you really want to track what's going on in the forest in great detail and be able to focus, let's say, limited funds to go after places that are either drying the most or are the most productive, you actually might need ASO data to track that, which we don't have yet. And at the same time, then be a little more thoughtful about what we'll call forestry or vegetation management or land management practices, where you can target in areas to try to mitigate losses or maintain productivity.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
We're talking about forest like it's our 100-acre farm. There's a lot we can control and manage.
Right.
And
well, that's the challenge. It's through a collaborative process because we don't get to do it ourselves.
Welcome to the Forest Service. Except we're trying to do something.
That's what this whole Headwaters project is about.
I know, I'm just.
Any additional feedback that's different from what we've already heard? Any additional feedback? Thank you very much for, this exercise. I know it's a little messy, but this is what we're trying to do at the IVCC, and it doesn't look a whole lot better there.
You just talk longer.
Pardon?
You just talk longer. If you
Well, I mean,
not you personally.
Well, I tried.
Personally too.
Hepo.
what do you got for us? Two things. Was it just two things?
Yeah, just two things about the canopy. If anyone would like to sign up for the canopy, we would appreciate it. We've had the canopy go out, see Chuck took it out on the 4th of July. We've had it out a couple times on the other side. But, Callie's gonna have some more pamphlets and things to hand out. So we'd love to see people get it out there.
Remember, the goal was to get every board member to do one event this year. Chuck Whiteman did one down at the 4th of July parade in Meeker and found out it was a heck of a lot of fun. He had over 100 people come by and talk to him. And he was like, well, what do I talk about? What do I do? He is the message. There's maps and pictures. I mean, people come over and they go, wow, that's really interesting. And so you just talk about what's there. It's not hard. And it's a big part of what we're supposed to be doing.
West Man's.
Well, yeah,
Raising his hand here.
the radio ads.
Russ
Russ has got his hand up.
Hey team, I'm sorry chiming in late. I didn't mean to derail the Peppo conversation. I just wanted to thank Jeff and Ken for their participation on IBCC and for helping lead that conversation. I would just echo, things that Ken said across the roundtables that we've been listening to, and even at the IBCC meeting. I think a lot of general support for both the topics that you brought up, forest health, and I didn't catch who raised it, but it's exactly right. Like forest health is a topic, but it's not, an action. So what specifically do we want to do around forest health, knowing that we need $4.2 billion just to address the top 10% of forests in the state? So what are ways that we want to really specifically get at actions that address that? I think that's the kind of level of detail that we're trying to get at. And on ASO chasm issues, I think you guys nailed all the same kind of things others are concerned about, that, it needs to be coupled with other technologies, that it doesn't, work equally well. I think, Jim Yon set out and, where he's at, that wouldn't really benefit him, but certainly we've seen massive impacts for basins like the Rio Grande, who even when it comes down to the water they're delivering over the border for compact issues, has really saved them. But even they have talked about many of the same things you noted. Do you need all the flights for the whole state? Do you need to do it every year? Could it be every other year? Could you rotate how you do it? I think just finding those efficiencies are all the same conversation. So really, it's great to get this kind of synergy of thinking, and applaud all you for the good input. And yeah, we'll keep talking about all these things. So thanks for your engagement tonight.
Thanks, Russ. Radio ads.
Radio ads, we came up with 4 radio ads between Ken and I, and we decided we'd try some 30-second ads. The old ones used to be a minute long and kind of interview style, so we're gonna shake it up a little bit. We approved some at the Peppo meeting, so if anyone wants their voice on the radio, let me know.
And you may have some suggestions. You may hear these and go, well, why aren't we talking about X? Messaging for us is a real challenge. So, what have we forgot to bring up? We thought we was at a place pretty safe here with what we've got. Got a couple of ideas that came up in the committee about additional ads. So give us some feedback there. And then I just wanted to do a shout out for Sally. She did this series of articles that she put into a newsletter for us so that we can stay current on everything in case you missed an article that was relevant. Thank you for doing that. I think I think everyone I've talked to really appreciates it. And thank you. She did that on her own initiative.
Yeah. So there was plenty of room at the Peppo meeting. You want to be more involved in Peppo? Ken would definitely love to have you attend the meeting. There was a couple empty chairs. I think there was room for at least a couple more.
Yep. So, yeah. And remember that we just lost Maddie. She was one of our active members of the Peppo committee. So we do always have room.
Okay.
That's all. Thanks.
Grants?
I've got a very quick update and good segue. Maddie actually participated also on the grants committee. And we will certainly take any volunteers to sit on that committee. We meet 4 times a year. Our next meeting meeting is, October 9th. We're in a bit of a cycle gap, if you will. Our last meeting was in, April, and then our next meeting is until October, and that just kind of follows the CWC grant cycle. So I wanted to just talk briefly about kind of more on the financial report. As Jeff pointed out, we've got 3 grants in the queue that will be heard at the CWCB meeting in September. Those total about $112,000. If those all get approved, that gets us below the threshold of $450,000. And then once you get below that threshold, we hope to be funded for the entire $300,000. If we get funded with that $300,000, we will start the new grant cycle this fall with about $685,000 to grant out. Now, historically, the committee has come to the board or the BRT members and kind of came up with a budget amount that's been about $400,000 every year. The grants committee, when they meet in October, will talk about that in addition to hearing any other grants. So we're in pretty good financial shape moving forward, but we'll have a fair bit of money to again grant out going into this next cycle. The other item I want to talk about the grants committee. We've historically done $800,000 or $400,000. I guess the caveat to that is if there's more grants than what we've actually budgeted, I think the grants committee would certainly be entertaining spending more money. Okay. So, the other thing I want to talk briefly about is, I don't know how many of you looked at the Yampa Basin Roundtable website. There's a lot of information about grants on. There's past grants, there's pending grants, there's many different reports about existing grants, and I'm looking at Sally because she doesn't know this, but you and I are going to update that.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
So it's something I think maybe you talked to Steve about, but one of my goals is to kind of get that as accurate as possible. With ones that are in progress, ones that have been completed, ones that maybe need to come off there because they've been completed 5 years ago. So we'll definitely be working on that. Other than that, again, if anyone's interested in joining this committee, we'll take anyone and everyone. And we'd love to have you in that next meeting. Let me back up. The grants for the first cycle of 2025 are due September 18th. And then the grant meeting is October 9th. So you don't need to tell me that you want to be on the committee, just show up on October 9th.
Yeah, they're all Zooms because it's hard to get people to drive 2 or 3 hours to attend that potentially an hour and a half or 2 hour meeting. So it's all on Zoom and it's worked really well for us for a number of years. So
The link's right at the bottom of the page with next to this meeting and FO and everything else.
yeah, everything's all on the homepage, all the meeting materials, the link to the Zoom, everything.
Well, Frank said that we'll take everyone and anyone, but I've always been curious, and I did volunteer earlier, but one on Wyoming night and 2 on a non-voting member. So my question is, can I make, if I were to be on that, could I vote in support or a composition of grants? And 2, as a Wyoming, would I be capable of making decisions about how
I think the first one, bylaws expert, yeah, you speak.
Well, what we do with PEPO is we allow a number of our most active members of the PEPO committee are not roundtable members.
Yeah.
And remember, the grants committee doesn't recommend, they don't pass any, we don't have the ability that this group, that's oriented.
Yeah, all we do is basically approve the roundtable hearing grant. That's what we do.
I would say as long as the projects are in Colorado and not in Wyoming.
We,
probably good.
yeah, you guys all.
Yeah, that's true.
No, if they're in Wyoming, then it's fine.
I know.
Oh, kidding aside, I guess you can. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I'll touch base with Jeff and Ben and
Just make sure.
if there's something they're not thinking of, that I don't see why. But it's right. Okay.
Was there a question for me there? Having a hard time hearing.
I think we're good, Jeff. I'll send you an email.
Okay.
Rehash it. Okay, Indy. You're up. So this is the one that has progress.
We're getting there. So again, my name is Cindy Figueroa. I'm the water commissioner for District 58, which is South Route. And one of the, you know, for Division of Water Resources anyway, the Bear River is one of the most highly administered river, probably, you know, probably in the county. But anyway, so we came to you guys, if you remember, I think about a year ago in January, to see if we could get some funding for the state of water telemetry installation project. And go ahead and go on to the next slide there. And if you'll recall, kind of like our goals and objectives, basically to maximize the accuracy and efficiency of our water deliveries, improve water management decisions, increase our adaptive capacity, provide transparent, equitable administration, and protect agriculture on senior water rights. And so we were gonna install basically, these are like just basically string gauges on ditches is what we're doing. So go ahead and go on to the next slide there. And so you all were great supporting the funding, and we moved forward. And the first thing we did is we had our chief hydrographer as well as our electronic specialists come up, and we went out to each of the diversions and we kind of like did these site assessments. You know, what did these diversions need? So did they run better, run more accurate? And also to kind of see how we were going to install them. So if you ever see the string gauges, you know, they're usually on a bridge or something like that, has some sort of infrastructure to hold on to them. So we're kind of trying to figure out how we're gonna install those, because, you know, we've got cattle, we've got sheep, we've got goats, we've got all these other kind of things that, you know, see a post and they want to rub up against it. And this is, you know, it's very expensive equipment here. So go ahead and go on to the next slide there. And so we sent these site assessments out to all of the water users. And this water user in particular did a great job on his diversion there, because, you know, things grow in and, you know, all the maintenance and stuff that needs to happen. But we wanted to make sure that these were all gonna run, you know, really well before we're gonna, you know, again, put these very expensive pieces of equipment on there. And so this is just, you know, the work that this water user did on this ditch here. And so we'll go ahead and go on to the next slide there. Okay, and then, so this is now, after he got all of the maintenance done, we've got water going through the ditch. And so again, our electronic specialist, Dave Hutchinson, and his right-hand man, Cheston Hart, came up. And that's, you know, on that left picture there, that's at least 4 years of experience with DWR doing this kind of stuff. So pretty exciting stuff. So what they decided to do was we actually mounted these, what they're called NEMA enclosures. That's for like the battery, the satellite logger, all that kind of stuff, directly onto the balloons themselves. So they'd be low profile. So you can't quite see it, but there's at the front of the balloon, right across the staff page, that's where the radar is. So it's hitting what level is right there. But anyway, so that's what they look like on the right there. It's got the antenna, the solar panel, the battery, all that kind of stuff in there. Go ahead and go on to the next slide there. So what does that translate to? Okay, well now this data we installed telemetry on 5 diversions, and that data is available right now online. So the near real-time data, you can go to the Colorado Decision Support website, and if you know how to search for anything, that's what that arrow is pointing to, is stations. We're going to go on to the next slide there. So you click on stations and you can search. And so up here, you can search by water district, you can search by water division. So if you want to, and this shows any gauge, stream gauge, these ditch gauges, everything like that. So, you know, if you're anywhere in water division 6, you know, you can bring up division 6 and then bring up all of the stream gauges and stuff that we have live. But more specifically for this tough stuff, if you search by water district 58, which is the upper Yampa, those first 5 gauges that come up are those ditches. So there's one we have on the Buckingham, the Ernest and Kelly, the Ira Van Camp, the Mill, and the Nickel. And so you can click and go ahead to the next slide there. And so like for the Hermitage and Colby, that was the ditch that I just showed you. If you click on view, it brings up the history there. of what this, this ditch has done over the past, 10 days, 30 days, or anything like that. So the neat thing about this is, so what these, data loggers do is they take a measurement every 15 minutes, and then they average that on an hour, and then they upload that, and it takes about 10, 15 minutes. So these ones are set on the 30-minute, so you can see them about 40 to 45 minutes. You can see what the average of that past hour was. And so go on to the next slide, because this is just the graph. But if you go on to the next one, so our goal, obviously, all of these ditches, they're gonna fluctuate with head pressure, what's happening on the stream and things like that. So our goal is basically to get a 24-hour average as close to that increase as possible. So it defaults to the hourly average. So right down there, you can change it to the 24-hour average. So change it to the 24-hour average. And then, the view option, you can either view the graph or the table. So I just selected the table so you can see how well or how not well I'm doing my job as how close I get. This particular diversion runs their degree is 4 CFS. So trying to get it as close to 4 CFS in a 24-hour average as possible. And so, that's the ultimate goal. So we go on to the next slide there, which is just to basically, thank you guys for your support. Projects like this would not happen if we didn't have funding from you guys. The funding from the CWCB, who, funds as much water projects as probably Sally made from college education. So we really appreciate all that. And it really does, it helps out with our management decisions. So if I'm timing water, I have to guess, like, okay, how long and how much water is in the system? How long is it gonna take this reservoir water to get down here? And I hit it as close as I can, but you can see that as it comes down these ditches, how it pressures. So I can time that water, and then, for one of the ditches, the mill ditch, for example, it's very sensitive to getting trashed up. So if you get one little stick in there, that thing will seal itself off. And so you can see it right away. Okay, once it drops, we've got to get out there and get it. So we can respond to these types of, these issues, much faster. It would have been really helpful. We had a lot of, spiky diurnals. We had a lot of flashy diurnals this year, and the amount of trash that stopped head gates from running when I needed to get 30 CFS down this ditch, 20 CFS down this ditch, and I got no water down any ditches, and having to run and find which ditch was clogged up. Having this on every single one of those, so I knew exactly what was going on, would be really cool. So anyway, just wanted to give you kind of an update on how that was going, and if you guys have any questions about the telemetry and what they're doing, I'd be happy to answer them.
When it's a game changer for you and water users.
It is for the water users too, because on our Colorado Decision Support website, you can, there's a lot of cool things you can do on there, but one of the cool things you can do is you can set alerts. So say, this person on the mill ditch, they can set an alert so that their degree is 1.3, and say it drops below 1 CFS, it'll ding them and say, hey, your diversion's below 1 CFS, so they can be off chasing cows or, chasing bulls or whatever else they're doing. They get this ping, and then they know they got to check their head gate. Or instead of having to, these things crash up, especially at the beginning of run-up season. So instead of like, well, I'll check it in the morning when I get a chance, and I'll check it at night when I get a chance. You check it when this tells you that you're losing pressure. So it allows these guys to optimize their time a lot better too. So, yeah, so it's pretty cool stuff so far. I knew it was gonna be cool, but it's pretty cool.
It's great to see the Division of Water Resources so involved in proactively helping the ranching community.
So how many more do you have to install on your current program?
Well, we have 17 more. And so they're coming up again at the end of July, and then we're gonna do 2 more installation sessions in August. And that should hopefully have almost all of them cleaned up. We have 2 that are kind of far off, the Trans Basin diversions, the one on Dome Creek and the one on Sardis Creek. Those might be our outliers, and we might get those a little late, like into September or something like that, but hopefully by the end of August, we'd like to have most of them set up. And, they kind of got their groove on, so when they first came up, they installed 1 diversion a day. On that first day, just trying to figure out how to get everything set up, how they were gonna ground the copper and do all everything. And then after that, they were doing easily 2 a day. So you know, installation will go much more efficient for the next few installs, so.
So your hope is to be completely done and like in date with
Yeah.
all of them
Yeah.
this year?
Yeah, by this year, and then next year, yeah, then we'll have all of them live.
Okay.
Begin at the beginning of the season. So,
Yeah.
yeah, as we go through, you know, I think some of the ones in August especially, you know, they might not be turned on. You know, if people are turned on for haying, we'll
Yeah.
still get it installed, but then, you know, we'll have to calibrate everything either. If they let us turn back on the next year, you know, just to get the radar set correctly, but then, yeah, have everything live, ready to go next year.
Yes, good.
Gotta make a comment here. I know, Mindy is completely underselling how much work it takes to administer the stretch of the river, having worked up there for 15 years. Not only is it a great thing for Division of Water Resources and Rangers, but for the storage water provider, it's a huge deal for the water users to have that much more certainty in what is going on at their head gate, because then it cuts down the amount of staff time our agency has to put in making adjustments and making sure that their water deliveries are coming out of the reservoir at the right times. And it gives the water users that sort of peace of mind knowing that, you know, they might be able to hang on to some stored water for a little bit longer than they would in the past, because they might be worried about going out of priority and not really knowing what their head gate has the capacity for as the river's changing, so they might have put in a water storage order a week early. You know, so, and a week sometimes can make a big difference for irrigations.
And also, you know, and for exactly what Andy's saying too, you know, the neighbors can see what other diversions are running. They're like, okay, maybe I don't need to turn on just yet, or, oh, this guy turned off. Oh, I need to turn on, you know, they can make their decisions, a lot better. If they know what other water's going where in the system. So I know a lot of water users have said that too. It helps me understand, you know, it helps them understand their return flows and things like that. So, and this is just, you know, these are just the first 5 and it's already quite a bit. So once everything gets in there, it's gonna be hopefully a lot smoother than it is now. So,
Okay, thanks, Mindy.
thank you.
Does anybody have any more questions for Mindy here in the room or online? Okay, hearing none. Thanks, Mindy.
Thank you for your time.
So Rebecca,
Yes.
your district update?
Just turning in. I'll make it quick. All right. So just kind of a few updates. I really appreciate the opportunity to give these updates. That, you know, kind of inform you guys what the river district is doing since we're spending your tax dollars representing, you know. So just kind of some updates on what's going on with us. We do have our upcoming board meeting next week. Our public packet is available on our website, so you can take a look at that. We're going to be discussing that information, and you can register for virtual attendance as well if you are interested in listening in. We officially finished our State of the River meetings this year. We had 10 across our 15 counties. We had over 700 attendees. We felt pretty happy about, pretty exciting stuff. We are following the system conservation pilot program. Did just get reauthorized through 2026. So since, you know, of course, a lot of those system conservation program plans happen within our district, that's something that we follow pretty closely. So definitely something that we're following and interested in. Our Shoshone water right that Ken brought up, we're still working on that. That's an ongoing project, of course, over many few years. But we are really excited that we've raised $54 million from our state and local partners. That includes, you know, $20 million from the CWCB through the projects bill, $20 million from our community funding partnership fund, and then a lot of contributions coming in from counties and cities, mutual, there's companies, all kinds of, you know, different groups coming together to put money into this. So we're getting there. We're also working with our partners, CWCB, on negotiating and executing the in-stream flow agreement within the coming year to include that in-stream flow right with the hydropower right. That is ongoing, and we're preparing to file a change of water rights application with Division 5 Water Court. And we're not
all the way there with our funding. We need $99 million total. So, as Warren mentioned earlier, one of those really important things is leveraging federal dollars, which are available right now. And that's where we're going for the rest of that, that funding is to the Bureau of Reclamation, to ask for federal funding. So we're working on that application package.
Rebecca, did you say 99?
99 is the total, and we have 54 million, so.
So we're passing the hat around right now.
We're halfway there.
Halfway there.
Hopefully gonna get a large amount, hopefully the remaining funding will be able to secure from the Bureau.
Hey, if we can do a Maybell ditch project, we can.
And that's right, yeah, we have the money already, right?
Yeah.
Tell me you're gonna come back to us.
Yeah.
We do have a date for our annual water seminar. It is in Grand Junction at Colorado State University on Friday, September 20th. I don't know if we have an agenda yet, maybe online, but always an exciting thing to learn. I'm sure Shoshone is gonna be talked about. And then this is like a really interesting time of year, I think, to look at some big river things. So I was just kind of doing some analysis earlier this week and things we're talking about. I think on a regional level, we're not looking terrible. We had pretty much average runoff in the Yampa and White. On like a western slope perspective, we have higher than expected atmospheric moisture. Our soil moisture is like average, it's not terrible. But when you start looking on like a really larger scale Colorado River Basin, it's not quite as rosy. We still have, 40% full at Lake Powell, not great after 2 years of pretty good snow. Lake Mead's 33% full. And we're kind of looking at now that monsoons are expected to not, or the models are saying that we may not get as much monsoon activity as is normal. So we could be looking at some dry conditions this summer. This is the Lake Powell, coming up. This is the Lake Powell unregulated inflow. It is that blue line is last year, the black line is this year, so less than this year. It's forecasted to be about 7.8 million acre feet into Lake Powell. Yeah. But outflow this year from Lake Powell is expected to be 7.5 million acre feet. So not a lot of difference there. Once you factor in evaporation, it's pretty much a wash. And so we're expecting 24. This next one will show 24-month study. We're expecting basically next year, spring, and 2 years out is probably just the same elevation or lower. We're not really expecting, less likely that we'll gain in elevation in Lake Powell. It's most probable that it remains the same.
Our stone cabbage is very tall this summer.
Yeah. So that's kind of the brief summary. I also just included in my slides, some of these links where I pull all these graphs. I think it's really fun to just kind of poke around here and look at all this really complex information. So if you haven't explored these already, I do recommend it. And then one of the most interesting things I think is this table link right here actually shows the Lake Powell inflow and outflow over like many decades. Really interesting variations, inflow in 20, I think last year was like 13 million acre feet, and then 2 years before that was like 3 million acre feet, which is troubling. But really large variations, which I think is just fascinating to look at. So just wanted to give that out, that useful information for anyone interested.
Yeah, your water nerd just showed.
I know, I'm so sorry. My mom didn't even get to see it.
So do you recommend just looking at the inflows and not even looking at the outflows, just to save of being anxious?
Yeah.
Thank you for getting that.
Yeah, that table might, when you look at the outflow column, might be frustrating.
That's what I'm saying, just look at it.
Yeah.
Inflows.
Yeah. But, yeah,
about Shoshone. First off, I think it's one of the most important water rights in the state of Colorado for recreations, especially being a recreator. Without that water flow, I'd have a hard time recreating in the fall. What's the priority date on that water right?
1912.
And
Senior right?
who owns the water right and who's getting all that money?
So Excel and.
Excel?
Yeah.
So in 1912, when those guys applied for that water right, they think they were gonna be $96 million.
You think our electricity would drop?
That's crazy.
We're gonna make some of that.
Yeah, so the water will be, it'll still continue to power. It'll be leased back to the free.
Hey Rebecca, I have a question about slightly smaller figures.
Sure.
Back to the SCPP, now that it's been authorized through 2026, you know, one of the big questions that comes up annually is, what are they gonna pay for it once you enroll in the program? Is there any way that, maybe now, for ag producers, we tend to be long range planners, that there may be some sort of, you know, forecasting or at least some announcement, way ahead of time on what the price per acre foot may be?
Well, sorry, just to clarify, it hasn't passed yet. The
Oh,
bill was
okay.
just introduced and it hasn't
Oh.
passed yet.
Yes.
Yeah, so they proposed extending it yet, but there's a road ahead.
Gotcha. All right, I'll ask that question after it passes.
Yeah, but that's right.
Yeah. But they
Yeah,
have the same bump sum that they got this year, then, or did that for more, or
I don't know what.
You might want to, I mean, truly, if you're not gonna go to Walden for our board meeting, you might want to tune in. It's available on YouTube and Zoom. We are having an agenda item to do a kind of lessons learned on SCPP, and we actually hired SGM to interview participants in the program and to pull together their experiences and anecdotes. So, if anything, I can't remember when that agenda item is. It's definitely on Wednesday, but I'm not sure what time. But that will be I think, a robust conversation about the pros and cons of SCP.
For me, I've always wondered what that tipping point is for each ag producer when they say, oh, you know what? That's a better option.
Any other questions for Rebecca here online?
That's a good update, thank you.
Happy to do it.
Yep, excellent. Hey, Jackie, you're still on. Did you send Sally what time on the agenda that might be that item? She's still
It's on her, it's on her.
on. Okay,
The agendas are.
okay,
It's either.
all right. Okay, so, we're down to announcements. So, thanks, Rebecca. So our industrial water interest person, Rich Thompson, has resigned his position as of basically now, at the end of the meeting. At the end of the meeting. So, we'll be looking to fill that. Sally will get an ad out for that and we'll be accepting, we'll have to get an application that we can send folks that are interested. And then we'll be hearing those folks at our September meeting that are interested in that. And Madison has resigned from the environmental representatives. And there's also a vacancy, so we'll be advertising both of those. And we'll be voting on them in September to fill those seats. And then the things that are on the website, I thought I'd just highlight. The Yampa River Festival in Craig is July 20th. The Colorado River District Water Seminar is September 20th, as Rebecca just pointed out. Upper Yampa Youth Festival is September 25th. The C9 Summit in Crested Butte is October 1st and 2nd. You've probably heard that at least 3 times, maybe 4 tonight. So, and then I have
Contact Steve with your intentions to attend.
Oh.
Wasn't that what he told us?
Yes, yeah. So I've already received a couple emails.
Oh, good.
During this meeting,
All right.
for folks that are planning on attending and would like to be part of the 10 that would get some funding. So if you're interested in going, please let me know. We'll try to figure out who can be reimbursed and who can't. Or who can, I guess, be reimbursed. I'll let Jeff figure out who can. But we want to get people signed up for that. And I know there's probably gonna be a rush on hotel rooms and whatever, so the earlier you get signed up, the better. So, I'll get with Jeff and see if they have a form, maybe Sally and I can come up with a form for us to deal internal, with who's out of the, because we're gonna need to track that. So, anybody have anything else for announcements that they'd like to? Yeah, Ken.
River cleanup this Saturday, Steamboat.
This
8 o'clock.
this coming Saturday.
This coming Saturday.
Okay.
And 8:30. It's little tunes.
Kelly?
If I might just, as a plug, so my position for the conservation districts executive director is now open for the next 2 weeks, so if anybody will be interested in my current job, you should check out the conservation district's website.
Okay. We're gonna miss you when you're gone.
I won't be very far.
I know. You'll still be 45 minutes up that road
No,
though.
I will, and I'll be right here.
Okay. So we talked about agenda items. We got a pretty good list from last time. Does anybody have any suggestions for our upcoming meetings, things that they'd like to see? We spent about 10 minutes last time and created a list of, 5 or 6, I would guess, so.
Yeah, I think we had weather modification was one of the things that we had on the list.
Yes, yep. So our next BRT meeting is September 11th. Here in Craig, in this very room. So I would take a motion to adjourn.
Well, I want to announce, we should bring up is any of the roundtable members that are interested in learning more about the Headwaters project. There is a tour on August 28th. Get a hold of Jonathan, let him know that you're interested, and we'll try to look in.
Still working on the details, but August 28th, it'll be based out of bags, and we'll go up Moody Creek and up the Little Snake and the shared Colorado line with Headwaters area. And kind of tour the diversity of project types and also the different types of environments that are looking at.
Okay, so you get that ironed out, can you send it to Sally? You can send it out to the.
We'll do it.
Okay. All right, I take a motion to adjourn.
Run moves.
Burner moves, do I have a second? Rich Thompson, say, oh, you're, wow. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Thank you. Thanks, everybody online. You're welcome.